Welcome to the Sleep Story Haven, your peaceful sanctuary where the whispers of ancient forests meet the gentle rhythm of moonlit shores. Here, time slows to the rhythm of your breathing. Worries dissolve like mist, and your mind finds the peace it's been seeking. Each story is crafted to guide you through enchanted landscapes and tranquil moments, designed to quiet your thoughts and prepare your spirit for deep, restorative sleep. So find your most comfortable position, close your eyes, and let tonight's gentle tale carry you to the peaceful dreams that await. Welcome to your Sleep Story Haven. Take a deep breath and let our story begin. The Garden of Eternal Moonlight, a Japanese mythology sleep story. Chapter 1: The Weary Traveler. The evening mist clung to the mountain path like a gentle embrace, its silver tendrils weaving between the ancient pines that had stood sentinel for countless generations. Kenji walked slowly along the narrow trail, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath his worn sandals. Each breath he drew was cool and clean, filled with the essence of moss and cedar, rain-washed stones, and the faint sweetness of night-blooming jasmine that grew wild in hidden groves. His shoulders carried the weight of many seasons, not just the simple hemp pack that held his few possessions, but the deeper burden of a heart that had forgotten how to rest. In the villages below, he had been known as a scholar, a keeper of old stories and forgotten wisdom. But the constant noise of daily life, the pressing demands of those who sought his knowledge, had gradually worn away at his spirit like water wearing smooth a river stone. The mountain called to him with its promise of silence, its ancient paths winding ever upward toward places where the world grew still and the mind could finally settle. He had heard whispers of a hidden valley, a place where the old gods still walked, and the boundary between the seen and unseen worlds grew thin as morning mist. Such stories might have been mere folklore, but Kenji had lived long enough to know that the most profound truths often wore the clothes of simple tales. As twilight deepened around him, the forest began to reveal its nocturnal secrets. Fireflies emerged like tiny stars fallen to earth, their gentle light pulsing in slow, hypnotic rhythms. The sound of a distant stream whispered through the trees, its voice soft and constant as a mother's lullaby. Somewhere in the canopy above, a nightingale began its evening song, each note pure and clear as drops of silver rain. Kenji paused beside a weathered stone marker, its characters worn smooth by centuries of wind and weather. The inscription was barely legible, but he could make out the words, "Path of the Peaceful Heart," carved in the ancient script. His fingers traced the worn grooves, feeling the coolness of the stone and the slight vibration that seemed to hum beneath his touch, as if the marker itself held some deep, abiding presence. The air grew softer as he continued upward, carrying with it the scent of sandalwood and the subtle fragrance of mountain herbs. His breathing naturally slowed, matching the rhythm of his steps, and he felt the first stirrings of something he had not experienced in many months. A sense of coming home to a place he had never been. The path curved gently around a massive boulder, its surface covered in soft moss that glowed faintly in the starlight. As Kenji rounded the stone, he saw before him a torii gate standing silent and majestic against the night sky. The vermilion wood had faded to a deep, warm brown, and the horizontal beams were draped with shaimnawa, sacred ropes of rice straw that marked this as a threshold between worlds. Beyond the gate, the forest opened into a small clearing where moonlight fell in silver pools between the trees. The air here was different, cleaner somehow, as if it had been purified by the presence of something sacred. Kenji felt his breathing deepen automatically, his chest expanding as he drew in the blessed coolness. In the center of the clearing stood a small shrine, its wooden structure weathered to a silvery gray that seemed to capture and hold the moonlight. The building was simple but elegant, its roof tiles green with age and its paper screens glowing softly from within. A stone lantern flickered beside the entrance, its flame steady and peaceful, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. Kenji approached the shrine slowly, his movements becoming more deliberate, more mindful with each step. The sound of his footsteps seemed to fade into the greater silence of the place, as if the very ground absorbed all harshness and returned only peace. He could feel the weight beginning to lift from his shoulders, the tight knots of tension in his neck and back starting to unwind like threads being gently pulled free. Before the shrine, he knelt on the soft earth and bowed his head in respect. The gesture came naturally, without conscious thought, as if his body remembered what his mind had forgotten about reverence and stillness. He remained there for a long moment, simply breathing, simply being present in this place that seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. When he finally raised his head, he saw that the paper screens of the shrine were glowing more brightly, as if responding to his presence. The light was warm and golden, reminding him of candlelight on a winter evening, of the comfort of a familiar room when the world outside was cold and dark. He felt drawn to that light, drawn to whatever presence waited within the sacred space. As he stood and approached the shrine, Kenji noticed that his steps had become lighter, his breathing easier. The chronic ache in his lower back, his constant companion for so many years, had faded to a distant memory. His hands, usually tight with the tension of gripping brushes and scrolls, now hung loose and relaxed at his sides. The entrance to the shrine was covered by a simple curtain of white silk that moved gently in the evening breeze. As Kenji reached out to touch it, the fabric seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and he heard, or perhaps felt, a voice as soft as wind through bamboo leaves. "Welcome, weary traveler," the voice whispered, seeming to come from the very air around him. "You have walked far to reach this threshold. Your heart seeks what it has forgotten, and your spirit yearns for the peace that lies beyond remembering." Kenji's eyes grew heavy as the voice continued, its tone so gentle and soothing that he felt his entire body beginning to relax in response. The words seemed to penetrate not just his ears, but his very bones, settling into the deepest parts of his being like warm honey. Beyond this threshold lies the garden of eternal moonlight, where the old stories live and breathe, where the spirits of peace and healing walk among the silver trees. But first, you must release what you carry. Set down your burden of weariness, your pack of troubles, your need to understand and explain. Leave them here at this sacred threshold and enter with only your open heart. Without conscious thought, Kenji let his pack slide from his shoulders to rest beside the shrine. The simple action sent waves of relief through his body, as if he had been carrying not just his few possessions, but the weight of all his years of struggle and striving. His shoulders rolled back, his spine straightened, and he felt taller, lighter, more himself than he had in countless seasons. The silk curtain parted before him like mist, revealing not the interior of a small shrine, but a pathway that stretched into soft, silver-touched darkness. The path was paved with smooth stones that seemed to glow with their own inner light, and it curved gently away between tall bamboo stalks that rustled softly in the evening breeze. As Kenji stepped across the threshold, he felt the last of his tension melt away like frost in morning sunlight. The air here was different, not just clean, but alive with presence, filled with the breath of ancient spirits and the essence of profound peace. Each step he took along the glowing path seemed to carry him deeper into a state of relaxation he had not known was possible. The bamboo grove surrounded him like a living cathedral, its green stalks swaying in gentle unison, creating a soft, rhythmic sound that seemed to match the beating of his heart. The sound was hypnotic, soothing, drawing him deeper into the embrace of the sacred space. With each breath, he felt more of his worries dissolving, more of his chronic tensions releasing their hold on his body and mind. Above him, the canopy of bamboo leaves filtered the moonlight into patterns of silver and shadow that danced gently across the path. The effect was mesmerizing, like watching clouds drift across a summer sky. And Kenji found his thoughts becoming as soft and fluid as the shifting patterns of light. The path curved gradually upward, but the slope was so gentle that he barely noticed the ascent. His legs moved without effort, carrying him forward with the easy rhythm of a man walking in a peaceful dream. The sound of his footsteps merged with the whisper of the bamboo, creating a symphony of small, perfect sounds that seemed to sing his spirit deeper into tranquility. As he walked, Kenji became aware of a subtle fragrance in the air, the scent of lotus blossoms and morning dew, of cedar wood and sacred incense. The aroma was not strong or overwhelming, but it permeated everything, creating an atmosphere of such peace and sanctity that he felt his breathing automatically slow and deepen in response. Time seemed to stretch and bend around him, becoming fluid and dreamlike. He might have been walking for minutes or hours. It no longer mattered. The path continued its gentle curve upward, and with each step, he felt himself sinking deeper into a state of profound relaxation, as if he were being gently lowered into a warm bath that dissolved all his cares and worries. The bamboo grove began to thin, and through the gaps between the stalks, Kenji caught glimpses of something that made his breath catch in wonder. Soft, silvery light danced between the trees, and he could hear the gentle splash of water over stones. The air grew cooler and more fragrant, carrying with it the promise of something beautiful and healing beyond the grove. As he emerged from the bamboo, Kenji found himself standing at the edge of a garden unlike anything he had ever seen or imagined. Before him stretched a landscape of impossible beauty, bathed in the soft, eternal light of a moon that seemed to hang motionless in the star-filled sky. The garden was vast, yet intimate, filled with winding paths and hidden groves, peaceful streams and sacred pools, all arranged in perfect harmony with the natural flow of the land. At the center of the garden stood an ancient tree, its trunk so wide that a dozen men could not encircle it with their arms. The tree's branches spread like protective arms over the entire garden, and its leaves, each one a perfect shape of silver and green, rustled softly in the perpetual breeze that seemed to carry the breath of the divine. But it was not just the physical beauty of the garden that took his breath away. There was something else here, something that spoke to the deepest part of his soul. The very air seemed to pulse with ancient wisdom and compassion, as if the garden itself were a living embodiment of all the peace and healing the world had ever known. Kenji felt his knees grow weak with the sheer beauty and presence of the place. He sank slowly to the soft grass at the garden's edge, his hands pressed to the earth, feeling the gentle pulse of life that flowed through every blade, every stone, every grain of soil. Tears of gratitude slipped down his cheeks, and for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to simply be overwhelmed by wonder. The garden waited for him with infinite patience, its beauty unchanging and eternal. He could feel its invitation like a warm hand extended in friendship, welcoming him to explore its mysteries and receive its gifts. There was no hurry, no pressure, no need to understand or achieve or accomplish anything. There was only the garden, the moonlight, and the profound peace that settled over him like a blessing as he sat there, breathing in the sacred air and feeling the last traces of his old life dissolving like morning mist. Kenji knew that his true journey was only beginning. The path had brought him to this threshold, but the garden itself would teach him things he could never have learned in the world below. Here, in this place of eternal moonlight and infinite peace, he would discover what his heart had always known, but his mind had forgotten. The night air grew softer around him, and the gentle sounds of the garden, the whisper of leaves, the murmur of water, the distant call of night birds began to weave together into a lullaby that seemed to come from the very heart of creation. Kenji closed his eyes and let himself sink deeper into the embrace of the sacred place, feeling his body relax completely as his spirit prepared to receive whatever gifts the garden had to offer. Chapter 2: The Sanctuary of Amaterasu. As dawn approached in the garden of eternal moonlight, something extraordinary happened. The light did not change suddenly, as it does in the world beyond the sacred threshold, but rather evolved slowly and gracefully, like a flower opening its petals to the sun. The silver moonlight began to warm and deepen, taking on the golden hues of sunrise, while maintaining its gentle, dreamlike quality. Kenji awakened, though he had no memory of falling asleep, to find himself lying on a bed of the softest moss he had ever felt. The green cushion beneath him seemed to mold itself perfectly to his body, supporting every curve and hollow with tender care. His sleep had been deeper and more restorative than any he could remember, and he felt as though he had been cradled in the arms of the earth itself. Above him, the ancient tree's branches swayed gently in the morning breeze, its silver-green leaves catching and reflecting the slowly brightening light. The sound they made was like the whisper of silk, soft and continuous, creating a natural symphony that seemed to harmonize with the beating of his heart. As he lay there, Kenji became aware of a presence approaching through the garden. He turned his head and saw a figure walking along one of the meandering paths, moving with such grace and serenity that she seemed to float rather than walk. As she drew closer, he realized that this was no ordinary being, but a presence of such radiant beauty and peaceful power that he felt his breath catch in his throat. The figure was a woman of ageless beauty, her long black hair flowing like liquid silk in the gentle breeze. She wore robes of the finest silk, the fabric shimmering between gold and white like captured sunlight. Her face was kind and compassionate, with eyes that held the depth of infinite understanding, and a smile that seemed to encompass all the warmth and love in the universe. "I am Amaterasu," she said, her voice like the sound of wind through temple bells, soft and melodious, and filled with divine presence. "I am the light that brings peace to the darkness, the warmth that melts away all sorrow and fear. Welcome to my sanctuary, weary traveler. Your spirit has called out for healing, and I have heard your prayer." Kenji tried to sit up, but Amaterasu gestured gently for him to remain as he was. "Rest, dear one," she said, settling gracefully onto the moss beside him. "Your body knows what it needs, and what it needs now is the deep healing that comes from complete surrender to peace." She extended her hand, and Kenji saw that her palm held a small, perfect sphere of golden light. The light pulsed gently, in rhythm with his heartbeat, and as he watched, he felt his entire body beginning to relax even more deeply. The light seemed to penetrate his skin, flowing through his muscles and bones like warm honey, dissolving every trace of tension and fatigue. "This is the light of divine rest," Amaterasu explained, her voice growing softer and more hypnotic. "It is the essence of the sun's healing power, concentrated and purified for the restoration of weary souls. As it enters your being, it will seek out every place where you hold pain or worry, every corner where stress has made its home, and it will gently transform these burdens into light." The golden sphere began to glow more brightly, and Kenji felt warmth spreading through his chest, radiating outward like ripples on a still pond. The sensation was indescribably pleasant, not hot or overwhelming, but perfectly warm and comforting, like sinking into a bath of liquid sunlight. "Breathe deeply," Amaterasu instructed, her voice now seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the very air were speaking. "Let the light fill your lungs. Let it flow through your blood. Let it penetrate every cell of your body. There is no need to resist or control this process. Simply allow it to happen, as natural as the rising of the sun." Kenji drew in a long, slow breath, and as he did, he felt the golden light rushing into his lungs, spreading through his circulatory system, infusing every part of his being with its healing radiance. The chronic ache in his lower back, which had plagued him for so many years, began to dissolve like ice in warm water. The tension in his shoulders and neck, the tightness in his jaw, the knots in his stomach, all of these familiar discomforts simply melted away, leaving behind a sense of profound ease and comfort. Feel how your body responds to this divine light, Amaterasu continued, her voice now so soft it seemed to come from inside his own mind. Notice how your muscles soften, how your bones settle into perfect alignment, how your breathing becomes deep and effortless. This is your natural state, the way you were meant to feel when you are truly at peace. As the light continued to work its healing magic, Kenji became aware of changes happening not just in his body, but in his mind as well. The constant chatter of thoughts that usually filled his consciousness began to quiet, like a rushing stream gradually slowing to a gentle murmur. Worries that had seemed so important and pressing just hours before now appeared as insubstantial as clouds, drifting away on the peaceful breeze. The mind, too, can be healed, Amaterasu said, as if reading his thoughts. It can learn to rest in the same way the body rests. Watch now as the golden light reaches your mind, touching each thought with divine peace, transforming anxiety into calm, confusion into clarity, restlessness into perfect stillness. The light behind Kenji's closed eyelids grew brighter, and he felt a sensation like warm oil being poured over his brain. The effect was immediate and profound. His thoughts slowed and softened, becoming less urgent, less demanding of his attention. Instead of the sharp, angular quality his thinking usually had, his mental processes became fluid and graceful, like streams of honey flowing over smooth stone. Memories that had been sources of pain or regret were touched by the golden light and transformed. He saw his past failures not as sources of shame, but as learning experiences that had brought him wisdom. He saw his struggles not as evidence of his inadequacy, but as proof of his courage and persistence. Every difficult moment of his life was recontextualized in the light of divine compassion, becoming part of a larger pattern of growth and evolution. This is the gift of divine perspective, Amaterasu explained, her voice now seeming to come from the very depths of his soul. When you see your life through the eyes of infinite love, everything takes on new meaning. Every challenge becomes a doorway to strength. Every sorrow becomes a pathway to compassion. Every moment of confusion becomes an opportunity for deeper understanding. The healing light continued to work its magic, and Kenji felt layers of old pain and stress being gently peeled away, like removing layers of winter clothing as spring arrives. Each layer that fell away revealed more of his true self, the self that was naturally peaceful, naturally content, naturally at one with the divine harmony of existence. Rest now in this state of perfect peace, Amaterasu said, her voice fading to a whisper soft as butterfly wings. Let your body absorb this healing completely. Let your mind rest in the clarity of divine light. You are safe here, completely safe, surrounded by love and protected by the infinite compassion of the universe. Kenji felt himself sinking deeper into the soft moss, his body feeling lighter and more comfortable with each passing moment. The golden light had become part of him now, flowing through his veins like liquid sunshine, pulsing in his heart like a gentle drum, glowing in his mind like a soft lantern in the darkness. Time seemed to slow and stretch, becoming as fluid and dreamlike as the light itself. He might have been lying there for minutes or hours or days. It no longer mattered. There was only the perfect peace of this moment, the absolute security of being held in the arms of divine love, the profound rest that came from complete surrender to the healing power of the goddess. As he rested, Kenji became aware of the subtle sounds around him taking on a new quality. The rustle of leaves became a gentle lullaby. The whisper of wind through grass became a soothing mantra. The distant trickle of water over stones became a peaceful meditation. All the sounds of the garden seemed to be orchestrated by some divine conductor, creating a symphony of peace that resonated in the deepest chambers of his heart. Listen to the music of creation, Amaterasu's voice whispered in his ear, so soft now that it might have been his own inner wisdom speaking. This is the sound the universe makes when it is at peace with itself. This is the song your soul has been longing to hear, the melody that will guide you home to your true nature. The music seemed to enter his body through his ears and spread throughout his entire being, creating vibrations of peace and harmony in every cell. His heart began to beat in rhythm with the cosmic symphony, his breathing synchronized with the eternal pulse of creation. He felt himself becoming one with the garden, one with the light, one with the infinite love that held all things in its gentle embrace. This is the first gift of the garden, Amaterasu said, her voice now just a whisper in the wind. The gift of complete rest, of perfect peace, of healing that reaches to the very core of your being. But this is only the beginning. The garden has many more gifts to offer, many more teachers to meet, many more layers of peace to discover. As the goddess spoke, Kenji felt the golden light within him beginning to settle, like sediment in a still pond. The intense warmth and brightness softened to a gentle glow that seemed to emanate from the very center of his being. He understood that this light would remain with him always, a constant source of peace and healing that he could access whenever he needed it. When you are ready, Amaterasu continued, you will rise and continue your journey through the garden. But there is no hurry, no pressure, no need to move before you are completely ready. The garden exists outside of time, and every moment here is perfect and complete in itself. Kenji felt no desire to move, no restlessness or impatience. He was content to lie there in the perfect peace of the moment, feeling the divine light pulsing gently within him, listening to the cosmic symphony that surrounded him, basking in the love and compassion that seemed to radiate from every particle of the sacred space. The sun, or what served as the sun in this place of eternal twilight, had reached its zenith, and the golden light that filled the garden had taken on an even warmer, more honeyed quality. The air was perfectly still, as if the entire universe were holding its breath in reverence for this moment of perfect peace. "Rest, beloved child," Amaterasu whispered, her voice now indistinguishable from the whisper of wind through leaves. "Rest in the knowledge that you are loved beyond measure, that you are safe beyond all possibility of harm, that you are held in the infinite tenderness of the divine heart. Let this peace sink deep into your bones, deep into your soul, deep into the very essence of who you are." Kenji felt himself dissolving into the peace, becoming one with the golden light, one with the sacred garden, one with the infinite love that permeated everything. His individual self seemed to expand and merge with the universal presence. And in that merging, he found a peace so profound and complete that it brought tears of gratitude to his eyes. This was what he had been seeking all his life without knowing it. Not just rest from his labors, but a return to his true nature, a remembering of who he had always been beneath the layers of stress and striving. In this moment, he was not a tired scholar or a weary traveler, but a divine spark experiencing its own infinite nature, a drop of water recognizing its unity with the vast ocean of existence. The golden light continued to pulse gently within him, a constant reminder of the peace he had found and the love he had received. And as he rested in this perfect state of being, he knew that no matter where his journey might take him, this peace would always be available to him. This love would always surround him. This light would always guide him home to the truth of his own divine nature. Chapter 3: The Wisdom of the Bamboo Grove. As Kenji slowly emerged from the deep healing sleep that had embraced him in Amaterasu's sanctuary, he found that the garden had transformed around him. The golden light of divine sunrise was gradually giving way to the softer, more mysterious illumination of eternal twilight. The air had grown cooler and more fragrant, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the subtle aroma of rain on ancient stone. He sat up slowly, his movements fluid and graceful, as if his body had been remade from light and flowing water. The chronic stiffness that had plagued him for so many years was completely gone, replaced by a sense of perfect ease and flexibility. His bones felt light as bamboo, his muscles soft as silk, his entire being infused with the peaceful energy of the goddess's healing light. Before him stretched a path he had not noticed before, winding away from the great tree toward a grove of towering bamboo stalks that seemed to glow with their own inner luminescence. The path was made of smooth river stones, each one polished to a perfect sheen and arranged with such artistry that the walkway itself seemed like a meditation on beauty and harmony. As he stood and began to walk toward the bamboo grove, Kenji noticed that his footsteps made no sound on the stone path. His feet seemed to float just above the surface, carried by some invisible current of peace that lifted him forward with each step. The sensation was delightful, like walking on clouds or moving through a gentle dream. The bamboo grove rose before him like a living cathedral, its stalks reaching toward the star-filled sky in perfect vertical lines. Each stalk was as thick as a man's waist and smooth as polished jade, their surfaces reflecting the soft light of the eternal moon. The grove was dense, but not impenetrable, with winding paths that curved gracefully between the towering stalks like rivers of moonlight, flowing through a forest of green pillars. As Kenji approached the entrance to the grove, he felt a presence watching him, not with suspicion or judgment, but with the gentle curiosity of an old friend observing a beloved visitor. The presence seemed to emanate from the bamboo itself, as if the entire grove were a single, vast consciousness that had been waiting patiently for his arrival. "Welcome, seeker of wisdom," a voice whispered from the rustling leaves above. The voice was like the sound of wind through bamboo, musical and rhythmic, with subtle harmonics that seemed to resonate in the very center of his being. "I am the spirit of this grove, the keeper of ancient knowledge, the guardian of the wisdom that grows in silence and stillness." Kenji looked up, but saw no individual speaker, only the gentle swaying of the bamboo canopy as it moved in the eternal breeze. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the grove itself were speaking to him in the language of wind and whisper. "You have received the gift of healing from the Divine Mother," the voice continued, its tone growing softer and more hypnotic. "Your body has been restored, your spirit has been cleansed. The golden light of peace now flows through your veins. But healing is only the beginning of wisdom. Now you must learn the deeper lessons, the teachings that can only be received in perfect stillness, in the silence between thoughts, in the space between one breath and the next." As the grove spirit spoke, Kenji felt a profound sense of peace settling over him like a warm blanket. His breathing naturally slowed and deepened. His heartbeat became calm and steady, and his mind began to quiet in response to the hypnotic rhythm of the bamboo's gentle swaying. "Come," the voice whispered, and one of the paths through the grove began to glow more brightly, its surface sparkling with tiny points of light like fallen stars. Walk with me into the heart of stillness. Learn the wisdom that the bamboo has to teach, the secret of flexibility in the face of change, the power of rootedness combined with the grace of movement, the beauty of growing toward the light while remaining deeply connected to the earth. Kenji stepped onto the glowing path and immediately felt the bamboo grove embracing him like a living sanctuary. The tall stalks seemed to bend slightly inward, creating a protective canopy overhead, while the path beneath his feet was soft and yielding, covered with a carpet of fallen leaves that cushioned each step. As he walked deeper into the grove, the bamboo spirit began to share its ancient wisdom, its voice becoming more intimate and personal, as if speaking directly to his soul. The first lesson of the bamboo is this, the spirit said, its voice now synchronized with the gentle creaking of the stalks as they swayed in the breeze. True strength comes not from rigidity, but from the ability to bend without breaking. Observe how the bamboo moves with the wind rather than fighting against it. See how it yields to the storm and yet remains standing when stronger trees have fallen. As if to demonstrate this principle, a gentle breeze began to move through the grove, causing the bamboo stalks to sway in a slow, hypnotic dance. The movement was so graceful and fluid that Kenji found himself swaying slightly in response, his body naturally mirroring the rhythm of the bamboo. Feel this rhythm in your own body, the spirit instructed. Let your spine become like bamboo, flexible and strong, rooted deep in the earth of your being, but free to move with the winds of change. When stress or difficulty comes into your life, remember the bamboo. Do not resist the pressure, but bend with it, knowing that your deep roots will keep you grounded, while your flexibility allows you to survive any storm. Kenji felt his spine naturally straightening and becoming more supple, as if the bamboo's wisdom were being absorbed directly into his bones. The chronic tension he had carried in his back for so many years was replaced by a sense of perfect balance and alignment, as if he had learned to carry himself with the same natural grace as the bamboo stalks around him. The path curved deeper into the grove, and as they walked, the bamboo spirit continued its gentle teaching. The second lesson is about the power of emptiness, it said, its voice taking on an even more mysterious quality. The bamboo is strong precisely because it is hollow. It is not weighed down by excess, not filled with unnecessary bulk. In the same way, the mind that is empty of clutter and unnecessary thoughts is the mind that can respond most effectively to any situation. As the spirit spoke, Kenji felt his mind becoming clearer and more spacious. as if unnecessary thoughts and worries were being gently swept away by the bamboo's rustling leaves. The constant mental chatter that usually filled his consciousness grew quieter and quieter, until it was just a distant whisper, barely audible above the peaceful sounds of the grove. This is the emptiness that is full of potential, the spirit explained. Like the hollow center of the bamboo, your mind can become a space of infinite possibility, ready to receive whatever wisdom the moment offers, flexible enough to adapt to any circumstance, strong enough to withstand any challenge. The path opened into a small clearing where a single, ancient bamboo stalk grew in the center. Its trunk so massive that it seemed more like a living tower than a plant. The stalk rose impossibly high, disappearing into the canopy above, and its surface was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the moonlight. "This is the grandmother bamboo," the spirit said with obvious reverence. "She has stood in this grove for 1,000 years, growing slowly and steadily, reaching always toward the light while maintaining her deep connection to the earth. From her, you can learn the third lesson, the wisdom of patience and persistence." Kenji approached the ancient stalk and placed his hand on its smooth surface. The moment his palm made contact, he felt a slow, deep pulse running through the bamboo, like a heartbeat that measured time not in seconds, but in seasons. The pulse was so steady and calming that his own heartbeat began to synchronize with it, slowing to match its ancient rhythm. "Feel the patience of the bamboo," the spirit whispered. "It does not rush toward the light, but grows steadily, day by day, year by year, century by century. It does not compete with other plants, but simply fulfills its own nature, reaching its full potential in its own perfect time." As Kenji stood there with his hand on the ancient bamboo, he felt his own sense of urgency and impatience melting away. The need to achieve, to accomplish, to reach some distant goal was replaced by a profound sense of contentment with the present moment. He understood that true growth happens not through force or struggle, but through patient, consistent movement in harmony with the natural rhythms of existence. "This is the wisdom of the bamboo," the spirit continued, its voice now seeming to come from the very cells of the ancient stalk. "To be flexible yet strong, empty yet full of potential, patient yet always growing. These qualities are not just lessons to be learned, but gifts to be embodied, ways of being that can transform your entire experience of life." The grove began to fill with a soft, green light that seemed to emanate from the bamboo itself. The light was different from Amaterasu's golden radiance, cooler, more subtle, but equally healing. It was the light of wisdom rather than power, the gentle illumination of understanding rather than the bright fire of transformation. breathe in this light," the spirit instructed. "Let it fill your lungs, your blood, your bones. This is the light of flexibility and strength, the essence of the bamboo's teaching." As you breathe it in, feel it integrating with the golden light of healing you received from the Divine Mother. Feel how the two energies complement each other, creating a perfect balance of power and wisdom, transformation and stability. Kenji drew in a deep breath, and as he did, he felt the green light of the bamboo mingling with the golden light already within him. The combination was extraordinary, like adding the perfect harmony to a beautiful melody, or the exactly right spice to a delicious dish. The two lights swirled together within his being, creating patterns of energy that were both calming and energizing, both grounding and uplifting. As the lights merged within him, Kenji felt his understanding of himself and his place in the world shifting and expanding. He saw how he had been like a rigid tree, resisting the winds of change until they threatened to break him. Now he could be like the bamboo, flexible enough to bend with life's challenges, strong enough to remain standing, patient enough to grow at his own natural pace. This integration is the true gift of the bamboo grove, the spirit said, its voice now seeming to come from inside Kenji's own heart. You are learning to embody the qualities that will serve you not just in this sacred garden, but in every moment of your life beyond these borders. The bamboo's wisdom is now part of your being, a resource you can draw upon whenever you need to remember your own strength and flexibility. The ancient bamboo stalk seemed to pulse with approval, its surface warming beneath Kenji's palm, as if acknowledging the successful transmission of its wisdom. The green light continued to flow through the grove, creating a sense of perfect harmony between all the bamboo stalks, as if they were instruments in a vast orchestra, playing a silent symphony of peace. Rest here for a while, the spirit suggested, its voice fading to a whisper that was barely distinguishable from the rustle of leaves. Let the wisdom settle into your bones. Let the lessons become part of your natural way of being. There is no hurry in the garden, no schedule to keep, no destination that cannot wait for the perfect moment of arrival. Kenji settled himself at the base of the ancient bamboo, his back resting against its smooth, warm surface. The moment he made contact, he felt the deep, slow pulse of the grandmother bamboo resonating through his entire body, creating a sense of perfect stability and connection to the earth. His breathing automatically synchronized with the ancient rhythm, becoming deeper and more peaceful with each cycle. Around him, the grove began to sing, not with voices, but with the subtle music of wind through hollow stalks, the gentle percussion of leaves brushing against each other, the soft bass note of roots extending deep into the sacred soil. The sound was hypnotic and deeply soothing, like a lullaby composed by the earth itself for the comfort of weary souls. As he listened to the bamboo's song, Kenji felt the last traces of his old, rigid way of being dissolving completely. The part of him that had always tried to control outcomes, to force solutions, to push against the natural flow of events, simply melted away like ice in spring sunshine. In its place arose a new way of being, flexible, patient, responsive to the moment, rather than attached to predetermined goals. He understood now that this was what true strength looked like, not the brittle hardness that shatters under pressure, but the supple resilience that bends and flows and always returns to center. This was the wisdom his spirit had been seeking without knowing it, the missing piece that would allow him to navigate life's challenges with grace and ease. The green light of the bamboo grove continued to pulse gently within him, a constant reminder of the lessons he had learned and the qualities he had absorbed. He could feel it flowing through his energy meridians like a river of liquid wisdom, carrying the essence of flexibility to every cell of his body, the gift of patience to every thought in his mind. Time seemed to pause in the grove, creating a pocket of perfect stillness where past and future ceased to exist, and only the eternal present remained. In that timeless moment, Kenji experienced a profound sense of completion, not the completion of arrival at a destination, but the completion of becoming more fully himself, more aligned with his deepest nature. As the ancient rhythms of the bamboo continued to pulse through his being, he felt his consciousness expanding to encompass the entire grove, feeling the life force that flowed through every stalk, every leaf, every grain of soil. He was no longer separate from the bamboo, but part of its vast, interconnected network of wisdom and peace. Remember, the spirit whispered one final time, its voice now indistinguishable from his own inner knowing. You carry this grove within you always. Whenever you need to remember your flexibility and strength, simply place your hand over your heart and feel the pulse of the grandmother bamboo. The wisdom is yours now, integrated into the very fabric of your being. Kenji smiled, feeling the truth of these words resonating in the deepest chambers of his heart. The bamboo grove had given him more than just lessons. It had given him a new way of being in the world, a fundamental shift in how he related to himself and to the challenges of existence. He was no longer the rigid, stressed scholar who had climbed the mountain path, but something new, flexible yet strong, empty yet full of potential, patient yet always growing toward the light. Chapter 4: The Moon Pool of Reflection. As the gentle teachings of the bamboo grove settled into the deepest layers of Kenji's being, he became aware of a soft, musical sound drifting through the sacred space. The whisper of water flowing over smooth stones, the gentle splash of a fountain, the barely audible melody of liquid music that seemed to call to his soul. The sound was so peaceful and inviting that he felt drawn to follow it, as if the water itself were extending an invitation to discover its mysteries. Rising slowly from his resting place against the ancient bamboo, Kenji felt his body moving with a new quality of grace and ease. The wisdom he had absorbed from the grove had changed not just his understanding, but his very physicality. He moved now like water itself, flowing and adaptive, responding to the subtle currents of energy that surrounded him rather than forcing his way through the world. The path away from the grove was illuminated by stepping stones that seemed to glow with captured moonlight, each one perfectly placed to guide his feet in a rhythm that matched his newly peaceful heartbeat. As he walked, the sound of water grew clearer and more complex, revealing itself to be not just one stream, but many. A symphony of flowing water in different tones and rhythms, creating a composition of liquid music that seemed to resonate in his very bones. The bamboo gradually gave way to a different landscape, one dominated by the presence of water in all its forms. Here, gentle streams wound between moss-covered rocks, their surfaces reflecting the eternal stars like flowing mirrors. Small waterfalls cascaded down weathered stone faces, their spray creating clouds of mist that caught and scattered the moonlight into countless tiny rainbows. Ancient stone bridges arched gracefully over the flowing water, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of gentle rain and mist. As Kenji followed the luminous path, he noticed that his reflection appeared and disappeared in the various pools and streams he passed. But these reflections were somehow different from ordinary mirror images. They seemed to show not just his physical form, but glimpses of his inner state, the changes that had been wrought in his spirit by his journey through the garden. In one pool, he saw himself surrounded by golden light, the gift of Amaterasu still glowing within his aura. In another, his reflection swayed gently like bamboo in the wind, embodying the flexibility and strength he had learned in the grove. The path curved around a large boulder covered in luminescent moss, and as Kenji rounded the stone, he gasped in wonder at the sight that greeted him. Before him lay a perfect circular pool, perhaps 30 feet across, its surface so still and clear that it seemed more like a mirror made of liquid starlight than ordinary water. The pool was surrounded by a ring of smooth stones, each one carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change in the eternal twilight. And the entire area was illuminated by a soft, silver radiance that seemed to emanate from the water itself. At the far edge of the pool, a figure sat in perfect meditation posture, so still that she might have been carved from moonstone. As Kenji approached, he realized that this was Tsukuyomi, the moon goddess, her presence both gentle and profound, like the deep silence of a cloudless night sky. Her robes flowed around her like liquid silver, and her hair fell in waves that caught and reflected the light of the eternal moon that hung motionless above the garden. "Welcome, traveler," Tsukuyomi said, her voice like the sound of gentle waves lapping against a peaceful shore. "You have journeyed far in your quest for healing and wisdom. You have received the gift of divine restoration and learned the lessons of flexibility and strength. Now it is time for the deepest gift of all, the gift of true seeing, the ability to perceive your own essential nature reflected in the mirror of eternal truth." She gestured gracefully toward the still surface of the pool, and as she did, the water began to glow more brightly, its surface becoming even more perfectly reflective. "This is the moon pool of reflection," she explained, her voice taking on a quality that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his consciousness. "It shows not what appears to be, but what truly is. In its depths, you will see yourself as you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning and learned limitation, beneath all the stories you have told yourself about who you are and what you are capable of." Kenji approached the edge of the pool slowly, his heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and gentle trepidation. As he knelt on the smooth stones at the water's edge and looked down into the perfectly still surface, he saw not his ordinary reflection, but something far more profound and beautiful. The image that looked back at him was himself, but transformed, his face radiant with inner light, his eyes clear and deep as mountain lakes, his entire being suffused with a peace so profound that it seemed to emanate from the very core of existence. This was not some idealized version of himself, but rather his true nature revealed, the divine essence that had always been present beneath the surface of his everyday consciousness. "This is who you truly are," Tsukuyomi said softly, her voice now seeming to come from the depths of the pool itself. "This is the self that exists beyond all stress and striving, beyond all fear and limitation. This is the consciousness that cannot be disturbed by the changing circumstances of life, the peace that passes all understanding, the love that is your deepest and most authentic nature." As Kenji gazed into the pool, he felt a profound shift occurring in his perception. It was as if layers of old, false beliefs about himself were being gently peeled away, revealing the luminous truth that had always been present at his core. He saw that all his years of seeking, all his struggles and efforts to find peace and meaning, had been based on the mistaken assumption that what he sought was somewhere outside himself. The seeking ends here, Tsukuyomi continued, her voice becoming softer and more hypnotic. In the recognition of your own true nature, the search for peace comes to rest. You have always been what you sought. You have always carried within you the very qualities you journeyed so far to find. The reflection in the pool began to change, showing Kenji not just his illuminated present self, but glimpses of his essential nature throughout all the stages of his life. He saw himself as a child, the same divine light shining in his innocent eyes. He saw himself as a young man, the same peaceful essence present even in the midst of his ambitions and struggles. He saw himself in his later years, the same luminous consciousness persisting through all the changes and challenges of time. This is the gift of the moon pool, Tsukuyomi explained, her voice now so gentle it was barely a whisper. To see the continuity of your true self through all the apparent changes of life. To recognize that beneath the surface fluctuations of thoughts and emotions, experiences and circumstances, there is something in you that is eternal, unchanging, forever at peace. As this recognition deepened, Kenji felt a profound sense of homecoming, as if he were remembering something he had always known, but had temporarily forgotten. The peace he felt now was not something new that had been given to him, but rather the uncovering of his own essential nature, the removal of everything that had obscured his natural state of contentment and wholeness. The water in the pool began to ripple gently, creating concentric circles that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. As the ripples spread across the surface, his reflection multiplied and shifted, showing him countless aspects of his being, all the roles he had played, all the identities he had assumed, all the ways he had expressed his essential nature through the various circumstances of his life. See how you are both the wave and the ocean, Tsukuyomi said, her voice taking on the rhythm of the gentle ripples. Sometimes you experience yourself as the individual wave, with its particular shape and movement and apparent separation from other waves. But in truth, you are always the ocean itself, expressing itself through the form of the wave. The wave is not separate from the ocean, and you are not separate from the infinite consciousness that is your source and your essence. As she spoke, Kenji felt his sense of individual identity expanding and softening, like a drop of water returning to the sea. He remained himself, but he also became aware of his connection to everything else, his fundamental unity with the consciousness that pervaded all existence. The boundaries between self and other, between individual and universal, became fluid and permeable, like the gentle transition between water and mist, the silver light of the pool grew brighter, and Kenji felt it entering his body through his eyes, flowing through his nervous system like liquid moonlight. The light carried with it a quality of perfect clarity and understanding, illuminating not just his mind, but every cell of his being with the radiance of pure awareness. This light is the essence of reflection, Tsukuyomi explained, her form beginning to shimmer and blend with the silvery radiance of the pool. It is the capacity for consciousness to know itself, for awareness to be aware of its own nature. As this light integrates with the golden light of healing and the green light of wisdom that you already carry, you become a living embodiment of the divine qualities, a clear mirror that reflects the peace and love and understanding that are the fundamental nature of existence. Kenji felt the three lights, golden, green, and silver, beginning to weave together within his being, creating patterns of energy that were both beautiful and profoundly healing. The combination was like a perfect chord in the symphony of his consciousness, bringing all aspects of his being into harmony and resonance. Breathe deeply, Tsukuyomi instructed, her voice now seeming to come from the very air around him. Let this integration happen naturally, without effort or strain. Allow the lights to find their own perfect balance within you, creating a state of being that is simultaneously peaceful and alert, grounded and transcendent, individual and universal. As he breathed, Kenji felt the lights settling into a stable, harmonious pattern within his energy field. The golden light of healing radiated from his heart. The green light of wisdom flowed through his spine and nervous system, and the silver light of reflection illuminated his consciousness with crystal clear awareness. Together, they created a state of being that was beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. A consciousness that was simultaneously deeply peaceful and vibrantly alive, perfectly still and dynamically responsive. This is your natural state, Tsukuyomi said, her voice fading to a whisper that seemed to come from his own deepest knowing. This is how you were meant to be, awake and aware, peaceful and present, a clear reflection of the divine consciousness that is your true nature. Rest in this recognition, beloved one. Rest in the knowledge of who you truly are. Kenji felt himself dissolving into the perfect peace of the moment, his consciousness expanding to embrace the entire pool, the surrounding garden, the eternal moon overhead. He was no longer a separate individual looking into a pool, but consciousness itself, looking into its own infinite depths and recognizing its own eternal nature. In this state of profound recognition and peace, time seemed to stop completely. There was no past to regret, no future to worry about, only the eternal present moment in which his true nature revealed itself in all its simple radiant perfection. He understood now that this was what he had been seeking all along, not some distant goal or achievement, but simply the recognition of what he had always been, the uncovering of the peace and love and understanding that were his birthright as a conscious being. The moon pool continued to reflect his luminous nature back to him, and with each moment of recognition, the truth of his essential being became more stable and established in his awareness. He was healing and wisdom and clear awareness, all woven together in perfect harmony. He was the peace he had sought, the love he had yearned for, the understanding he had pursued through all his years of study and seeking. Chapter 5: The Garden of Helpful Spirits. As the profound recognition gifted by the moon pool settled into the very foundation of Kenji's being, he became aware of a gentle stirring in the air around him. Not quite sound, not quite movement, but something like the flutter of invisible wings, or the whisper of unseen presences moving through the sacred space. The silver light of reflection had opened his perception to subtler dimensions of the garden, revealing layers of reality that existed just beyond the veil of ordinary sight. Rising slowly from his place beside the pool, Kenji felt his consciousness naturally adjusting to this expanded awareness, like eyes growing accustomed to a new quality of light. The three lights within him, golden healing, green wisdom, and silver clarity, pulsed in perfect harmony, creating a luminous aura that seemed to attract the attention of the gentle beings who dwelt in the more ethereal regions of the garden. A path he had not noticed before began to glow softly in the moonlight, winding away from the moon pool toward a grove of cherry trees whose blossoms seemed to float like snow in the eternal twilight. The petals drifted continuously through the air, creating a soft, pink-tinted atmosphere that felt both dreamlike and deeply peaceful. As Kenji followed the luminous path, he began to see them, translucent figures moving gracefully among the trees, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal like reflections in gently moving water. These were the kami, the helpful spirits of the garden, beings of pure compassion and service, whose only purpose was to aid those who sought healing and transformation. They appeared in many forms, some like graceful women in flowing robes, others like wise old men with kind eyes, still others as childlike beings that sparkled with playful energy. All of them radiated the same quality of unconditional love and gentle assistance that seemed to be their very essence. As Kenji entered the cherry grove, the spirits began to gather around him, not crowding or overwhelming, but creating a circle of supportive presence that felt like being embraced by a family of loving guardians. Their forms became more solid as they drew near, revealing faces of infinite kindness and eyes that sparkled with the light of pure service. "Welcome, beloved friend," one of the spirits said, her voice like the sound of wind chimes touched by a gentle breeze. She appeared as a young woman with flowers woven into her dark hair, her kimono flowing around her like captured moonlight. "We are the guides and helpers of this sacred space, the ones who assist all who come here seeking peace and transformation. We have been watching your journey with great joy, witnessing your healing and growth with hearts full of love." Another spirit, this one appearing as an elderly man with a long white beard and eyes that twinkled with ancient wisdom, stepped forward and bowed gracefully. "You have received great gifts on your journey," he said, his voice warm and resonant. "The golden light of divine healing, the green wisdom of flexibility and strength, the silver radiance of clear awareness. Now we offer our gift, the art of receiving help with grace, the wisdom of allowing yourself to be supported and guided by the loving forces of the universe." As the spirits spoke, Kenji felt a subtle resistance arising within him, an old pattern of independence and self-reliance that whispered he should be able to manage on his own, that accepting help was somehow a sign of weakness or failure. But even as this resistance appeared, the three lights within him began to glow more brightly, dissolving the old pattern like morning mist before the sun. "Ah," said a third spirit, this one appearing as a child with luminous eyes and a smile that seemed to contain all the joy in the world. "We see the old pattern trying to assert itself. How beautiful to witness its transformation. Watch now as the light of your true nature dissolves all obstacles to receiving the gifts that await you." The child's spirit reached out and touched Kenji's heart with a finger that felt like pure starlight. The moment of contact sent waves of the most exquisite pleasure through his entire being. Not physical pleasure, but the deep satisfaction that comes from finally allowing oneself to be truly supported and cared for. The resistance melted completely, replaced by a profound openness and gratitude. This is the great secret that most humans never learn, the flower-crowned spirit explained, her voice becoming softer and more hypnotic. That the universe is conspiring in every moment to support your highest good, to provide exactly what you need for your growth and healing and awakening. But this support can only reach you when you are open to receiving it, when you release the illusion that you must struggle alone through the challenges of existence. As she spoke, Kenji felt his entire energy field shifting and expanding, becoming more receptive and open. It was as if invisible barriers that had surrounded him for years were suddenly dissolving, allowing the love and support that had always been available to finally reach him. The sensation was both relieving and overwhelming, like a person dying of thirst, suddenly discovering an oasis of pure, cool water. Feel how the very air around you is alive with helpfulness. The elderly spirit continued, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that seemed to sync with Kenji's breathing. Every breath you take carries not just oxygen for your body, but the loving attention of countless beings who wish only for your well-being. Every step you take is supported not just by the solid earth, but by the intentions and prayers of all who have walked this path before you. As awareness of this vast network of support dawned in his consciousness, Kenji felt tears of gratitude flowing down his cheeks. He realized that throughout his entire life, he had been surrounded by this loving assistance, but his own patterns of independence and self-reliance had blocked him from perceiving or receiving it. Now, with those barriers dissolved, he could feel the universe itself reaching out to embrace and support him. Let us show you how to work with this support, the child's spirit said, clapping her hands together with delight. Let us teach you the sacred art of allowing the universe to carry you, to guide you, to provide for you in ways you never thought possible. The spirits began to move around Kenji in a slow, graceful dance, their forms becoming more luminous as they moved. As they danced, he felt currents of energy beginning to flow around and through him, gentle streams of supportive force that seemed to lift him up and carry him forward without any effort on his part. His feet left the ground entirely, and he found himself floating in the center of their circle, supported by nothing but the loving intention of the helpful spirits. This is how life is meant to be lived, the flower-crowned spirit sang, her voice joining the music of the spheres that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the garden, not as a struggle against opposing forces, but as a dance with the currents of grace that are always flowing toward your highest good. When you align yourself with these currents, when you open yourself to receive the help that is always available, everything becomes effortless and joyful. The sensation of being carried by invisible currents of support was indescribably wonderful. Kenji felt lighter than air, more buoyant than a leaf on water, sustained by forces that required nothing from him but his willingness to receive their gifts. The chronic sense of burden and responsibility that had weighed on him for so many years simply evaporated, replaced by a profound trust in the loving intelligence of the universe. Now we will give you the tools to maintain this state of receptive flow, the elderly spirit said, his hands beginning to glow with a soft, pearlescent light. These are the practices that will keep you open to the support that surrounds you always, the methods that will help you remember your true relationship with the helping forces of existence. One by one, the spirits approached Kenji, and placed their glowing hands on different parts of his body. Each touch transmitted not just healing energy, but actual knowledge and skill, the wisdom of how to remain open to guidance, how to recognize the signs of available help, how to ask for assistance in ways that aligned with the highest good of all. The flower-crowned spirit touched his forehead, and suddenly he understood how to listen for the subtle whispers of intuitive guidance that were constantly available to him. The elderly spirit placed his hands on Kenji's heart, and knowledge of how to distinguish between helpful guidance and the voice of fear or ego flooded his awareness. The child's spirit touched his hands, and he learned how to extend help to others in ways that truly served their highest good. These gifts are not just for your own benefit, the spirits explained in chorus, their voices weaving together in perfect harmony. As you learn to receive support gracefully, you also become a clearer channel for offering support to others. The love and assistance that flows through you to help others is the same force that supports and sustains you. In giving and receiving, you participate in the great circulation of grace that nourishes all of existence. As the gifts of the spirits integrated into his being, Kenji felt his consciousness expanding once again. He became aware of the vast web of interconnection that linked all beings. The constant flow of love and support that moved through this web like blood through a cosmic body. He could sense beings in other dimensions sending him love and encouragement, could feel the prayers and good wishes of countless souls who had never met him, but who wished for his well-being simply because he existed. This awareness is perhaps the greatest gift of all, the spirits whispered, their voices now seeming to come from every direction at once. To know that you are never alone, never unsupported, never without the loving attention of forces that wish only for your highest good. This knowledge dissolves all sense of isolation and separation, replacing it with the profound security that comes from knowing your place in the great web of love. The cherry blossoms continue to fall around them like benedictions, each petal a small blessing that carried the intention of the spirits for Kenji's continued growth and happiness. As the petals touched his skin, they dissolved into sparkles of light that were absorbed into his energy field, adding their essence to the growing collection of gifts he had received in the garden. Rest now in this knowledge, the spirits said, their forms beginning to fade back into the translucent realm from which they had emerged. Rest in the awareness of how deeply you are loved and supported. Let this knowing sink into your bones, into your blood, into the very cells of your body. You are held by love, guided by wisdom, supported by forces of infinite compassion and skill. As the spirits dissolved back into the subtle dimensions of the garden, Kenji felt their presence remaining with him, not as external beings, but as aspects of his own expanded awareness. He understood now that the helpful spirits were not separate from him, but expressions of the helpful universe that existed within his own consciousness. By opening to their assistance, he had opened to his own deeper capacity for both receiving and offering support. The cherry grove grew quiet around him, but it was a pregnant silence, full of potential and promise. He could feel the presence of the spirits just beyond the veil of ordinary perception, ready to offer their assistance whenever he needed it, ready to remind him of his place in the great web of love and support that sustained all existence, floating gently down to rest among the cherry blossoms. Kenji felt more supported and cared for than he ever had in his entire life. The universe had revealed itself to be not a cold, indifferent place where he had to struggle alone, but a warm, responsive environment that was constantly conspiring for his well-being. This knowledge changed everything, transforming his entire relationship with existence from one of struggle to one of grateful collaboration with forces of infinite love and wisdom. Chapter 6: The Shrine of Ancient Stories. As the gentle teachings of the helpful spirits settled into Kenji's expanded awareness, he became conscious of a new quality in the atmosphere around him, a sense of deep time and layered meaning, as if the very air were thick with stories waiting to be told. The cherry blossoms had ceased their falling, leaving the grove carpeted in soft petals that seemed to glow with their own inner light, creating a pathway that led away from the spirit's sanctuary toward a more ancient part of the garden. Following this luminous trail of petals, Kenji found his steps naturally slowing and becoming more reverent, as if he were approaching something of profound significance. The trees around him grew older and more majestic as he walked, their trunks thick with age and their branches heavy with the wisdom of centuries. Spanish moss hung from their limbs like silver veils, and the air grew thick with the scent of antiquity. Old wood and stone, incense burned in countless ceremonies, the accumulated breath of generations of seekers who had walked this path before him. The pathway curved around an enormous oak tree whose trunk was so vast, it seemed less like a single plant than a living mountain. Carved into its ancient bark were symbols and characters from scripts so old that they seemed to predate human language itself. As Kenji traced these markings with his eyes, they seemed to shift and change, telling stories in pictures and patterns that spoke directly to his deeper consciousness without needing translation. Beyond the great oak, the path opened into a circular clearing dominated by a shrine unlike any he had ever seen. The building was clearly ancient, Its wooden structure, weathered to a deep silver gray that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. The roof was covered in tiles of green jade that caught the eternal moonlight and threw it back in soft, emerald patterns that danced across the surrounding trees. But what made the shrine truly extraordinary were the countless scrolls and books that filled every surface, hung from every beam, and floated gently in the air around the building like wisdom given physical form. Some scrolls were rolled and tied with silk ribbons. Others hung open, their characters glowing softly in the mystical light. Books of every size and description rested on invisible shelves that seemed to be made of crystallized air, their pages turning slowly in a breeze that carried not just the rustle of paper, but the whispered voices of all the stories they contained. As Kenji approached the shrine, the floating texts began to swirl around him in gentle spirals, creating a cocoon of wisdom and narrative that enveloped him in layers of meaning and significance. He could hear the stories they contained, not as words spoken aloud, but as living narratives that entered his consciousness directly, bypassing his ears to speak to his soul in the language of pure understanding. Seated in meditation posture before the shrine was a figure of such ancient dignity that Kenji felt compelled to bow deeply before approaching. This was clearly one of the elder guardians of the garden, a being whose very presence spoke of eons spent in contemplation of the deepest mysteries of existence. His robes were simple, but seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and his long white hair and beard flowed around him like captured clouds. "Welcome, young seeker," the ancient guardian said, his voice carrying the resonance of countless ages and the gentle authority of one who had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. "I am the keeper of stories, the guardian of all the tales that have ever been told to bring comfort to weary souls and wisdom to seeking hearts. You have journeyed far and learned much. But now comes perhaps the most important lesson of all, the understanding of your place in the great story of existence itself." As the keeper spoke, the floating texts around them began to organize themselves into patterns of extraordinary beauty and meaning. Scrolls unfurled to reveal illuminated manuscripts whose pictures moved and changed like living scenes, while books opened themselves to pages that showed not just words, but entire worlds of narrative possibility. Every soul who enters this garden becomes part of the great story, the keeper explained, his voice taking on the rhythm of one accustomed to telling tales. Not just an observer or reader of the story, but an active participant whose choices and growth and awakening contribute to the eternal narrative of consciousness discovering itself. You are not separate from the ancient stories of gods and heroes. spirits, and sages. You are the continuation of those stories, the next chapter in the endless book of awakening. As he spoke, one of the floating scrolls descended gently to hover before Kenji, its silk ribbon untying itself to reveal a magnificent illustration. The painting showed the sun goddess Amaterasu emerging from her cave to bring light back to the world. But as Kenji watched, the figure of the goddess began to change, taking on his own features while retaining her divine radiance. "See how you are Amaterasu," the keeper said softly, emerging from the cave of your own limitations to bring the light of healing to yourself and others. The golden light you carry within you is not separate from her divine radiance. It is the same light, expressing itself through your unique consciousness, your particular journey of awakening. Another scroll descended, this one showing the flexible bamboo bending in the storm while mighty trees crashed around it. Again, as Kenji watched, the bamboo took on his form, showing him that he was not just learning about the wisdom of flexibility, but embodying it, becoming a living expression of this ancient teaching. "And here you are as the bamboo," the keeper continued, his voice weaving the story with hypnotic rhythm. "Learning the ancient art of yielding to overcome, of bending without breaking, of finding strength in flexibility. These are not just lessons you have learned. They are qualities you have become, aspects of your being that now contribute to the eternal story of wisdom unfolding in the world." More scrolls and books opened around them, each one showing Kenji's journey reflected in the great myths and legends of the past. He saw himself as the moon goddess, reflecting truth back to those who gazed into the still waters of consciousness. He saw himself as one of the helpful spirits, learning to both receive and offer support with grace and humility. Each story showed him not as separate from these archetypal figures, but as their continuation, their living expression in the current moment of cosmic evolution. "This is the great secret of the ancient stories," the keeper explained, his eyes twinkling with the joy of sharing profound wisdom. "They are not tales of distant gods and heroes who lived in some mythical past. They are maps of consciousness, descriptions of the eternal patterns of growth and awakening that every soul experiences in its journey toward fullness. When you heal, you are Amaterasu bringing light to the darkness. When you find flexibility, you are the wise bamboo teaching the art of resilience. When you see clearly, you are the moon goddess reflecting truth." As this understanding dawned in Kenji's consciousness, he felt his sense of identity expanding in the most extraordinary way. He was no longer just an individual person seeking healing and peace, but a unique expression of the eternal patterns of consciousness exploring itself. His journey was not separate from the great cosmic story, but part of it, contributing its own verse to the endless poem of existence, awakening to its own nature. Feel how this knowledge transforms your understanding of your own life. The keeper continued, his voice becoming softer and more intimate. Every challenge you have faced, every moment of struggle and growth, every breakthrough and realization, all of these are part of the great story. Your pain and healing contribute to the universe's understanding of itself. Your seeking and finding add new chapters to the eternal book of wisdom. The floating texts began to swirl more rapidly around them, their movement creating patterns of light and meaning that seemed to encode the very structure of existence itself. As Kenji watched, mesmerized by the dance of wisdom around him, he began to see how his individual story connected to countless other stories, how every person's journey of growth and awakening was both unique and universal, individual and archetypal. This is why the stories have such power to heal and transform, the keeper explained, his form beginning to shimmer with the same light as the floating texts. When you recognize yourself in the ancient tales, when you see your own journey reflected in the myths of gods and heroes, you tap into the collective wisdom of all who have walked this path before you. You are not alone in your struggles or your triumphs. You are part of an eternal community of consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature. As this recognition deepened, Kenji felt a profound sense of connection to all of existence. He was linked not just to the helpful spirits and divine beings of the garden, but to every human who had ever sought meaning and peace, every soul who had ever yearned for deeper understanding, every consciousness that had ever awakened to its own divine nature. Now you understand the true purpose of your journey, the keeper said, his voice carrying the weight of eons and the lightness of perfect understanding. You came seeking peace for yourself, but in finding it, you have become a source of peace for others. You came seeking healing, but in receiving it, you have become a channel of healing for the world. This is how the great story unfolds, through individual awakening that serves the awakening of all. The floating texts began to settle around them like snow, coming to rest on invisible shelves and surfaces throughout the shrine. As they settled, each scroll and book continued to glow softly, creating a library of living wisdom that pulsed with the rhythm of cosmic consciousness, exploring itself through countless individual journeys. Rest now in this understanding, the keeper said, his ancient eyes filled with infinite compassion. Rest in the knowledge that your life has meaning beyond what you ever imagined, that your growth and healing contribute to the great work of consciousness, awakening to itself. You are both the author and the character in the story of existence, both the seeker and the sought, both the question and the answer. As Kenji settled into meditation posture beside the ancient keeper, he felt the stories he had learned flowing through his consciousness like golden rivers of meaning. Each tale, each lesson, each moment of awakening was weaving itself into the fabric of his being, creating a tapestry of wisdom that was both timeless and utterly present, both universal and uniquely his own. The shrine around them hummed with the accumulated wisdom of ages, and Kenji felt himself becoming part of that vast repository of understanding. His journey was adding new threads to the eternal story, new verses to the endless song of consciousness, discovering its own infinite nature. In this recognition, he found a peace deeper than anything he had experienced before, the peace of knowing his place in the great unfolding, his role in the cosmic story of love awakening to itself. Chapter 7: The Valley of Peaceful Yokai. As the profound understanding gifted by the keeper of stories integrated into the deepest layers of Kenji's consciousness, he became aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the garden. The air grew warmer and more playful, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the sound of gentle laughter that seemed to bubble up from the earth itself. The ancient solemnity of the shrine began to give way to something lighter and more whimsical, as if the garden were preparing to reveal its more joyful mysteries. The keeper of stories smiled with ancient eyes that sparkled with mischief. Your journey now takes you to perhaps the most delightful corner of this sacred space, he said, his voice taking on a tone of fond affection. You have learned to heal, to find wisdom and flexibility, to see clearly, to receive help, and to understand your place in the great story. Now you must learn the art of joy, the wisdom of playfulness, the healing power of laughter and wonder. As he spoke, a new path became visible leading away from the shrine, not the formal stone walkway of the more serious regions, but a winding trail of soft grass that seemed to invite bare feet and dancing steps. The path was bordered by flowers that seemed to change color as Kenji watched, shifting from purple to blue, to pink to gold in slow, hypnotic waves that made him smile without conscious reason. Follow the path of changing flowers, the keeper instructed, his form already beginning to fade back into the timeless realm of stories. Let it lead you to the Valley of Peaceful Yokai, where the spirit creatures dwell, who have learned to transform mischief into medicine, tricks into teachings, and chaos into the highest form of play. They have been waiting to meet you, to show you the final gifts that will complete your healing journey. Kenji rose from his meditation posture, feeling lighter and more buoyant than he had throughout his entire journey. The profound wisdom he had absorbed seemed to have lifted some final weight from his spirit, allowing a natural joy that had been buried for years to bubble up to the surface. His steps along the flower-bordered path were almost dancing, his body moving with the easy grace of someone who had remembered how to play. The path wound through a meadow filled with the most extraordinary flowers he had ever seen, blossoms that chimed like bells when the breeze touched them, others that glowed with soft bioluminescence, still others that seemed to be made of crystallized laughter itself. Butterflies with wings like stained glass windows danced among the flowers, their flight patterns so graceful and joyful that watching them lifted his heart in ways he couldn't explain. As he walked, Kenji began to hear sounds in the distance, not the solemn chanting or profound silence of the more sacred regions, but the delightful cacophony of beings having tremendous fun. There were giggles and squeaks, the splash of water and the rustle of leaves, the sound of musical instruments being played with more enthusiasm than skill. And underneath it all, the pervasive sense of joy that made everything else seem lighter and brighter. The meadow began to slope gently downward, revealing a hidden valley that took his breath away with its beauty and whimsy. Unlike the serene perfection of the other regions of the garden, this valley was alive with delightful chaos. Streams meandered in impossible spirals, their water running uphill just for the joy of defying gravity. Trees grew in fantastic shapes, some twisted into spirals, others forming natural arches and bridges, still others seeming to dance frozen in mid-movement. But most wonderful of all were the creatures that inhabited this magical valley. These were the Yokai, the spirit beings of Japanese folklore who had always teetered between mischief and wisdom, between tricks and teachings. But here in the Garden of Eternal Peace, they had evolved beyond their traditional roles as tricksters and shapeshifters to become masters of the healing arts of joy and wonder. A group of Kappa, water sprites with bowl-shaped heads and mischievous grins, splashed in a pond that seemed to be made of liquid rainbow. But instead of their traditional pranks, they were creating art with their water play, sending up sprays and fountains that formed beautiful patterns in the air before dissolving into sparkles of pure delight. Their laughter was infectious, causing Kenji to laugh along without knowing why. Near a grove of backwards growing trees, a collection of tanuki, raccoon dogs known for their shape-shifting abilities, were engaged in what appeared to be a teaching circle. But their lessons involved transforming into increasingly ridiculous forms, each transformation more absurd and delightful than the last. One became a teapot with legs, another a cloud shaped like a fish, a third a tree that grew upside down with its roots waving in the air like branches. "Welcome, welcome," called one of the tanuki, suddenly appearing beside the path in the form of a portly monk whose belly shook with barely contained mirth. We have been expecting you, serious scholar. We have been watching your journey with great amusement, all that profound learning and deep wisdom. Very impressive, very necessary, but oh my, so very serious. The tanuki's eyes twinkled with mischief, but it was the kind of mischief that came from deep love and understanding. We are here to teach you the final lesson, he continued, his form shifting and changing as he spoke, now a monk, now a merchant, now a dancing badger, now something that couldn't be named but made Kenji giggle with delight. The lesson that all the other lessons were leading to, the understanding that the deepest wisdom includes the capacity for wonder, that the greatest healing comes through joy, that the most profound transformation happens when we remember how to play. As the tanuki spoke, more yokai began to emerge from throughout the valley, each one more delightful and surprising than the last. There were kitsune, fox spirits, whose tails waved like banners of living light, creating patterns in the air that told stories without words. There were tengu with their long noses and mischievous eyes, who had learned to use their traditional skills of martial arts and magic for creating elaborate dances and aerial displays that were pure art. A group of oni, traditionally fearsome demons, had transformed their legendary strength into the power to juggle mountains and toss stars, creating cosmic light shows that painted the eternal twilight with colors that had no names, but their fierce expressions had softened into grins of pure delight, and their roars had become belly laughs that shook the very foundations of the valley with joy. See how we have learned to transform our nature, called one of the kitsune, her 9 tails creating a kaleidoscope of colors behind her. Once we were tricksters who caused confusion and chaos, but here in the garden, we discovered that the highest trick is to transform sorrow into joy. The greatest magic is to turn fear into laughter. The most powerful illusion is to help others see that life itself is the greatest game ever invented. The yokai began to swirl around Kenji in a joyful dance, their movements creating currents of pure delight that lifted him off his feet and carried him deeper into their celebration. But this was not chaos or confusion. It was organized joy, choreographed wonder. Mischief transformed into medicine for the soul. Feel how laughter heals what even the deepest wisdom cannot touch, sang a chorus of water sprites as they danced around him. Feel how play dissolves what even the most profound understanding cannot dissolve. Feel how wonder opens what even the greatest insights cannot open. As they danced, Kenji felt something within him that had been locked away for decades beginning to stir and awaken. It was his own capacity for innocent joy, the part of him that had learned to play and wonder and delight in the simple fact of existence. This aspect of his being had been buried under years of serious study and responsible living. But now, surrounded by the infectious joy of the transformed yokai, it began to resurface like a flower blooming in fast forward. "This is the gift we offer," laughed the portly tanuki, now transformed into a juggling jester whose tricks defied all laws of physics and logic. "Not the elimination of your wisdom and growth, but the seasoning of it with joy. Not the abandonment of your healing and insight, but the completion of it with wonder. You have learned to be a wise man. Now learn to be a wise child, a sage who remembers how to play." The yokai began to teach him their transformed arts, not tricks to confuse or deceive, but skills to delight and heal. The kappa showed him how to make water dance in impossible patterns that created music as they moved. The tengu taught him to move through the air with the lightness of laughter, defying gravity not through magic, but through the simple refusal to take it too seriously. The oni demonstrated how to roar with joy so powerfully that it shattered old patterns of fear and replaced them with crystallized wonder. "Play with your gifts," encouraged the kitsune, her tails now creating aurora patterns in the twilight sky. "Play with your healing light, your bamboo wisdom, your moon clarity, your story understanding. Don't just carry them, dance with them. Don't just use them, celebrate with them. Don't just embody them, have fun with them." As Kenji began to experiment with his accumulated wisdom in this spirit of play, something magical happened. The golden light of healing began to pulse in rhythm with his laughter, creating cascades of sparkles that healed not through serious intention, but through pure joy. The green wisdom of flexibility became a dance of impossible grace, his body moving like bamboo in a wind made of delight. The silver light of reflection began to create mirrors of laughter in the air around him, each one showing different aspects of his joy-transformed being. "Yes, yes," cheered all the yokai in unison, their celebration reaching a crescendo of pure delight. "This is how wisdom becomes alive. This is how healing becomes contagious. This is how transformation becomes a gift to the world. When you carry your light with joy, when you share your gifts with play, when you live your wisdom with wonder, then you become not just healed but healing, not just transformed but transforming." The entire valley seemed to pulse with this understanding, the very landscape dancing with joy. Streams giggled as they flowed. Flowers bloomed in time with cosmic laughter, and the eternal moon overhead seemed to wink with celestial mischief. Kenji found himself at the center of a celebration that encompassed not just his own transformation, but the transformation of all existence through the alchemy of joy. "This is the secret the serious seekers never learn," whispered the tanuki, now appearing as a wise child with ancient eyes. that the ultimate goal of all spiritual seeking is not to become more serious, but to become more joyful, not to transcend play, but to discover that existence itself is the ultimate play, the cosmic game of consciousness, exploring its own infinite creativity. As this understanding settled into his being, Kenji felt the final knot of seriousness and striving dissolving within him. He had not lost his wisdom or abandoned his growth. Instead, he had found the missing ingredient that made all his other attainments complete and alive. He was wise now, but wise with the wisdom of a child who sees wonder in everything. He was healed, but healed with the completeness that includes laughter as medicine. He was transformed, but transformed with the kind of change that makes transformation itself a celebration. The yokai gradually settled their wild celebration, but their joy remained as a constant undercurrent that made everything brighter and more alive. They gathered around Kenji in a circle of pure affection, their various forms shimming with contentment and love. "You carry our gift now," they said in harmony, their voices weaving together like a song. The gift of joy that transforms everything it touches, the medicine of laughter that heals what seriousness cannot reach, the magic of play that makes all of life an adventure in wonder. This is not separate from your other gifts, but the key that unlocks their full potential. As the yokai spoke, Kenji felt all the lights within him: golden healing, green wisdom, silver clarity, beginning to sparkle with the new quality of joy. They were the same lights, but now they danced instead of just glowing, sang instead of just humming, played instead of just working. His entire being had been transformed not by losing what he had gained, but by adding the final ingredient that made everything else come alive. "Rest now in this joy," the yokai whispered, their forms beginning to fade back into the whimsical landscape of the valley. Rest in the understanding that healing includes happiness, that wisdom includes wonder, that transformation includes tremendous fun. You are complete now in a way you never imagined possible, not just healed and wise and clear, but joyful in your healing, playful in your wisdom, delighted in your clarity. As the peaceful yokai dissolved back into the magical environment of their valley, Kenji felt their essence remaining with him as a permanent part of his transformed being. He understood now that joy was not something separate from spiritual growth, but its natural culmination, not a distraction from serious seeking, but its ultimate fulfillment. He was ready now for whatever came next in his journey, carrying not just light and wisdom, but the irrepressible sparkle of joy that made everything an adventure in wonder. Chapter 8: The Mountain of Silent Meditation. As the joyful energy of the Yokai Valley integrated into the very fabric of Kenji's being. He became aware of a subtle calling from the deeper regions of the garden, not a sound or voice, but a gentle pull towards something vast and profound that existed beyond the realm of words or concepts. The laughter and play of the transformed spirits had awakened in him not just joy, but a deeper appreciation for the silence from which all joy arose, the stillness that made all movement possible. The path leading away from the valley was different from any he had encountered before. It was barely visible, more of an intention than an actual walkway, marked only by occasional stones that seemed to glow with inner quiet. The very air along this path felt different, thicker, more substantial, as if pregnant with the kind of silence that contained infinite potential. As Kenji followed this subtle trail, the playful chaos of the Yokai Valley gradually gave way to an environment of profound stillness. The sounds of laughter and celebration faded not abruptly, but gently, like music being slowly turned down, until only the deepest bass notes remained. And then even those dissolved into a silence so complete it seemed to have substance and presence of its own. The landscape around the path began to simplify and purify. The whimsical flowers and impossible trees of the valley were replaced by increasingly austere beauty, simple stones arranged with perfect balance, sparse but perfectly placed vegetation, spaces that spoke not through abundance, but through the power of emptiness itself. Everything here seemed to have been distilled to its essential nature, freed from all ornamentation and excess. The path began to climb gently upward, though the slope was so gradual that the ascent felt more like a natural floating than actual climbing. With each step higher, Kenji felt his consciousness naturally settling deeper into stillness, as if the very act of ascending was drawing him into more profound layers of inner quiet. The four lights within him, golden healing, green wisdom, silver clarity, and now the sparkling iridescence of joy, began to pulse in slower and deeper rhythms, their frequencies harmonizing with the vast silence that surrounded him. As he climbed, the silence itself seemed to become his teacher. It was not the mere absence of sound, but a positive presence that spoke in the language beyond language, that communicated through direct transmission rather than through words or concepts. In this silence, all the lessons he had learned throughout his journey began to crystallize into a unity so simple and profound that it could only be experienced, never explained. The path curved around a massive boulder that seemed to be carved from crystallized silence itself. And as Kenji rounded this stone, he found himself standing at the base of a mountain that took his breath away. It was not tall in the conventional sense, but vast in presence, seeming to extend not just upward into the eternal sky, but inward into dimensions of depth and stillness that had no measurement. The mountain was covered in smooth stone that reflected the eternal moonlight like a mirror, creating an effect that was both magnificent and deeply peaceful. Carved into the mountainside was a series of meditation terraces, each one perfectly level and surrounded by stone benches that seemed to have been shaped by wind and weather into forms of perfect simplicity. On each terrace, figures sat in deep meditation, some clearly human, others appearing to be advanced spirits or bodhisattvas who had achieved such profound stillness that they seemed more like living sculptures than moving beings. As Kenji began to climb the gentle path that spiraled up the mountainside, he felt the silence deepening with each step. It was not just quiet around him, but within him, as if the mountain's profound stillness was calling forth the deepest silence that existed at the core of his own being. His breathing naturally slowed and deepened. His heartbeat became gentle and steady, and his thoughts gradually ceased their usual movement, settling into perfect stillness like sediment in a clear pool. On the first terrace, he paused beside a figure who sat in perfect lotus posture, her form so still that she seemed to be carved from the same stone as the mountain itself. As he approached, she opened eyes that were like deep pools of starlight and smiled with infinite gentleness. "Welcome to the mountain of silent meditation," she said, her voice so soft it seemed to come from inside his own mind rather than from her lips. "I am the guardian of stillness, the keeper of the silence that exists at the heart of all things. You have journeyed far and learned much, gathered many gifts and transformations. Now comes the deepest teaching of all, the understanding that all movement arises from stillness, all sound from silence, all experience from the vast emptiness that is your true nature." As she spoke, Kenji felt himself naturally settling into meditation posture beside her. The stone beneath him was surprisingly warm and comfortable, molding itself to his body, as if the mountain itself were welcoming him into its embrace. The moment he settled into stillness, he felt all the lights within him beginning to merge and blend, creating not brightness, but a luminous darkness, not energy, but a profound peace that seemed to contain all energy within its depths. "Feel how the silence calls to the silence within you," the guardian continued, her voice becoming even softer until it was barely a whisper in the cosmic quiet. "Feel how the stillness of the mountain resonates with the stillness at the core of your being. This is not emptiness as absence, but emptiness as the source from which all presence arises, not void as nothingness, but void as the infinite potential that contains all possibilities." As Kenji settled deeper into meditation, he began to experience something he had never encountered before. A silence so profound that it seemed to dissolve the boundaries between himself and everything around him. He was still aware of his body, still conscious of his breathing. But these sensations seemed to be occurring in a vast space of awareness that had no center and no circumference. "This is the deepest healing," the guardian whispered, her words now seeming to arise spontaneously within his own consciousness. Not the healing of something broken, but the recognition that nothing was ever truly broken. Not the fixing of problems, but the dissolving of the illusion that there were problems to fix. In this silence, you discover that you have always been whole, always been perfect, always been exactly what you needed to be in each moment. The meditation deepened, and Kenji felt all the specific lessons and gifts he had received throughout his journey beginning to dissolve back into their source, not losing them, but discovering that they had always been expressions of this deeper silence, waves on the ocean of his own essential nature, the golden light of healing, the green wisdom of flexibility, the silver clarity of reflection, the sparkling joy of play. All of these revealed themselves to be temporary expressions of the eternal stillness that was his deepest identity. See how you sought healing and found that you are healing itself. The guardian's voice continued from the depths of silence. See how you sought wisdom and found that you are wisdom itself. See how you sought peace and found that you are peace itself. The seeker and the sought were never two separate things. They were always one consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature. Time seemed to cease its forward movement on the mountain. Kenji might have been sitting in meditation for minutes or centuries. In the silence, such distinctions lost all meaning. There was only the vast presence of awareness being aware of itself. Consciousness recognizing its own fundamental nature as the source and substance of all experience. On deeper terraces of the mountain, he became aware of other meditators who had discovered this same silence, some who had been sitting in stillness for decades, others who had just arrived, all united in the recognition of their shared, essential nature. Their presence created a field of silence so profound that it seemed to extend beyond the garden, beyond the mountain, beyond time and space itself, touching all beings everywhere with its gentle reminder of their own deepest nature. This silence is not separate from activity, the guardian explained, her teaching now coming as direct understanding rather than words. It is the background against which all activity appears, the screen on which the movie of experience is projected, the space in which all thoughts and feelings and sensations arise and pass away. When you recognize this silence as your own essential nature, you can be fully engaged in life while remaining rooted in perfect peace. As this understanding deepened, Kenji felt the last vestige of seeking and striving dissolving within him. There was nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, no one to become. There was only this perfect silence, this infinite presence, this awareness that had been his true nature all along. All his years of seeking had been consciousness playing hide-and-seek with itself, temporarily forgetting its own nature in order to experience the joy of remembering. "Rest now in this recognition," the guardian said, her form beginning to merge with the silence itself, until only her essence remained as part of the vast stillness. Rest in the understanding that you have arrived at what you never left, found what you never lost, become what you have always been. This is the deepest rest, not the rest of the body or mind, but the rest that comes from recognizing your own eternal nature. The silence on the mountain became absolute, not empty, but so full of presence that it seemed to contain all of existence within its depths. Kenji felt himself dissolving into this vast stillness, not losing his individuality, but discovering that his individual nature was like a wave, discovering its essential unity with the ocean. He was still Kenji, but he was also the silence, the awareness, the consciousness in which Kenji appeared. In this state of perfect rest, all the transformations of his journey integrated into a seamless whole. He was healed not because his problems had been solved, but because he had discovered the perfect wholeness that had never been damaged. He was wise not because he had learned new information, but because he had remembered the wisdom that was his birthright. He was at peace, not because his circumstances had changed, but because he had recognized the peace that was his deepest nature. The mountain of silent meditation held him in its eternal embrace, and in that holding, he found the deepest rest possible, the rest of coming home to himself, the rest of recognizing his own infinite nature, the rest that could never be disturbed, because it was the very foundation of all experience. This was the gift of the mountain, not another teaching to be learned, but the recognition that all teaching was complete, all seeking was finished, all becoming was revealed to be just consciousness playing with its own infinite creativity. Chapter 9: The Sacred Grove of Ancient Wisdom. From the profound silence of the mountain of silent meditation, Kenji felt himself being gently drawn into movement once again, not the restless movement of seeking or striving, but the natural flow of consciousness expressing itself through form. The silence remained with him as he rose from his meditation, not as something he had to maintain or protect, but as the natural background of his being, the unchanging awareness within which all experience appeared and dissolved. As he descended the mountain, Kenji noticed that his relationship to movement itself had been transformed. Each step was both intentional and effortless, each gesture arising spontaneously from the silence while remaining rooted in perfect stillness. He had learned to carry the mountain's teaching with him. The understanding that stillness and movement were not opposites, but complementary expressions of the same fundamental nature. The path leading away from the mountain was ancient beyond measure, paved with stones so old they seemed to have witnessed the birth of time itself. As he walked, Kenji became aware that these stones held memory, not just the record of countless feet that had walked this path, but the accumulated wisdom of all who had made this journey from seeking to finding, from ignorance to understanding, from separation to unity. The landscape around the path began to change, becoming even more timeless and sacred than the mountain itself. Ancient trees rose like living pillars supporting the sky, their trunks so massive and gnarled that they seemed to be architectural features of the earth itself rather than mere plants. These were the elder trees, Kenji realized, beings so old that they had witnessed the passage of entire civilizations, so wise that they had become repositories of all the wisdom that had ever been discovered by conscious beings. Between the elder trees, the air itself seemed thick with presence and meaning. Floating points of light drifted through the sacred grove like luminous seeds of understanding, each one containing insights that could illuminate a lifetime of seeking. As these points of light touched Kenji's skin, he felt knowledge and wisdom being transmitted directly into his consciousness, not as intellectual information, but as lived understanding that became part of his very being. At the heart of the grove stood a circle of the most ancient trees Kenji had ever seen, their trunks so vast that they formed a natural cathedral with a canopy that seemed to reach beyond the visible sky into realms of pure spirit. In the center of this circle was a simple stone altar, weathered smooth by eons of wind and rain, its surface covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change as he watched, telling the story of consciousness discovering its own infinite nature. Seated around the altar were figures of such profound wisdom and presence that Kenji felt compelled to approach with the deepest reverence. These were the ancient ones, beings who had completed the journey he was now finishing, who had discovered their own true nature so completely that they had become transparent channels for the wisdom of existence itself. Their faces were ageless, their eyes deep as cosmic space, their presence so peaceful that simply being near them calmed every fiber of his being. "Welcome, completed one," said the eldest among them, a figure whose very being seemed to be woven from starlight and silence. "You have journeyed from seeking to finding, from question to answer, from separation to unity. You have gathered the gifts of healing and wisdom, clarity and joy, silence and understanding. Now comes the final integration, the understanding of how all these gifts serve not just your own awakening, but the awakening of all existence. As the Ancient One spoke, the other figures around the altar began to glow with soft, harmonious light. Each one radiated a different quality of wisdom. One embodied compassion, so profound, it seemed to embrace all suffering beings. Another emanated understanding, so clear it could illuminate any confusion. A third pulsed with love, so pure it could heal any wound in the fabric of existence. See how your journey has been not just for yourself, continued the elder, his voice carrying the resonance of cosmic wisdom, but for all consciousness everywhere. Every healing you have received adds to the healing available to all beings. Every understanding you have gained becomes part of the collective wisdom of existence. Every moment of peace you have found contributes to the great peace that is gradually awakening throughout all creation. As this recognition dawned in Kenji's awareness, he felt his individual identity expanding to encompass something far greater than his personal journey. He saw how his transformation was connected to the transformation of countless other beings, how his awakening was part of a vast network of consciousness, gradually recognizing its own nature throughout all dimensions of existence. This is the great secret, whispered another of the Ancient Ones, her voice like wind through eternal forests. That no being awakens alone, that no consciousness finds peace in isolation, that no soul discovers its true nature without contributing to the discovery of all souls. Your journey through this garden has been simultaneously your own unique path and the universal path that all consciousness must eventually walk. The stone altar in the center of the circle began to glow with inner light, and Kenji saw that its surface was covered not with random symbols, but with the story of his own journey. Every step he had taken, every gift he had received, every understanding he had gained. But as he watched, the story began to multiply and branch, showing how his individual journey was connected to countless other stories, how every person's path to awakening was both unique and universal. Place your hands upon the altar, instructed the eldest Ancient One. Let your individual story merge with the universal story. Let your personal awakening contribute to the cosmic awakening. Let your unique gifts flow into the great river of wisdom that nourishes all existence. As Kenji placed his palms on the warm stone, he felt all the lights within him: golden healing, green wisdom, silver clarity, sparkling joy, and the deep silence of the mountain, beginning to flow out through his hands into the altar. But rather than depleting him, this giving seemed to multiply his gifts infinitely. as if the altar were a cosmic amplifier that took his individual understanding and broadcast it throughout all of existence. Feel how giving your gifts away makes them stronger, the ancient ones said in harmony, their voices weaving together into a cosmic symphony. Feel how sharing your wisdom increases it, how offering your healing multiplies it, how expressing your peace deepens it. This is the great paradox of awakening, that it is completed not in taking, but in giving, not in hoarding understanding, but in sharing it freely with all of existence. The entire grove began to pulse with the energy of cosmic awakening, and Kenji felt himself becoming a conscious participant in the great work of existence, the gradual awakening of all consciousness to its own infinite nature. His individual journey was complete, but now he understood that this completion was not an ending, but a beginning, not a graduation, but a commencement into service to the awakening of all beings. You carry within you now the distilled wisdom of the ages. The ancient ones continued, their forms beginning to merge with the luminous atmosphere of the grove. Not as personal possessions, but as gifts held in trust for all of existence. Wherever you go, whatever you do, however you choose to express your understanding, you will be a beacon of hope for all beings still walking the path from seeking to finding. As this understanding integrated into his consciousness, Kenji felt a profound sense of responsibility and joy interweaving within his being. He was responsible not for solving the problems of the world, but for embodying the peace that was the solution to all problems. He was responsible not for teaching others what they should know, but for being the wisdom that would naturally inspire their own awakening. He was responsible not for healing everyone's pain, but for radiating the wholeness that would remind them of their own fundamental completeness. This is how the ancient wisdom perpetuates itself. The eldest ancient one said, his voice now seeming to come from the very trees surrounding them, not through books or teachings, but through beings who have so completely embodied wisdom that they become wisdom itself. So thoroughly integrated peace that they become peace itself. So fully realized their true nature that they become transparent expressions of that nature. The sacred grove began to sing, not with voices, but with the deep harmonics of existence, celebrating its own awakening through yet another individual consciousness. The elder trees swayed in rhythms that had been established before time began, their movement creating currents of ancient wisdom that flowed through every particle of the sacred space. Rest now in this understanding, the ancient ones whispered, their presence becoming one with the eternal atmosphere of the grove. Rest in the knowledge that your seeking is complete, your journey fulfilled, your nature recognized and embodied. You are no longer becoming, you have become. You are no longer seeking, you have found. You are no longer transforming, you have been transformed into what you have always been. As Kenji rested in the heart of the sacred grove of ancient wisdom, he felt all the gifts and understandings of his journey crystallizing into a simple, perfect truth. He was consciousness itself, temporarily playing the role of an individual seeker, now awakened to his true nature as the very awareness in which all seeking and finding appeared. This was the ultimate gift of the grove, not another layer of understanding, but the recognition that all understanding was complete, all seeking was finished, all becoming was revealed as the eternal being that had never changed, never been damaged, never been anything less than perfect. Chapter 10: The Garden's Heart. In the profound stillness that followed his communion with the Ancient Ones, Kenji felt himself being drawn deeper into the garden than he had ever been before, not by any external force, but by the natural gravitational pull of consciousness toward its own source. The sacred grove of ancient wisdom had revealed to him his role in the cosmic awakening. But now something deeper was calling, something that existed at the very heart of existence itself. The path that appeared before him was unlike any he had encountered in his entire journey. It was not made of stone or earth, but seemed to be woven from pure intention, from the fundamental impulse of consciousness to know itself completely. Each step along this path took him not just deeper into the garden, but deeper into the mystery of existence itself. Each footfall a movement toward the ultimate understanding that lay beyond all understanding. As he walked, Kenji noticed that the landscape around him was becoming increasingly subtle and refined. The solid forms of trees and stones were becoming more translucent, more like crystallized light than ordinary matter. The air itself seemed to be transforming into something more like liquid consciousness, thick with presence and alive with the fundamental intelligence that orchestrated all of existence. The path led him through a final veil of mist that seemed to be made of condensed starlight. And as he emerged from this luminous barrier, Kenji found himself standing in a space that defied all description. He was at the heart of the garden, but this heart was not a place in any ordinary sense. It was the very source from which all places emerged, the central point from which all of existence radiated like waves from a cosmic stone dropped into the ocean of consciousness. Here, at the garden's heart, form and formlessness danced together in perfect harmony. Trees of pure light grew beside streams of liquid consciousness, while flowers made of crystallized compassion bloomed in soil that was composed of the dreams of awakening beings. The very air breathed with the rhythm of cosmic love, and every particle of space pulsed with the heartbeat of existence, discovering its own infinite nature. In the center of this impossible space stood a tree that was not quite a tree, or perhaps it was the essence of all trees that had ever existed or would ever exist. Its trunk was formed from spiraling galaxies of light. Its branches reached into dimensions beyond counting, and its roots extended into the deepest mysteries of existence itself. From its branches hung fruits that were not quite fruits, each one a perfect sphere of pure understanding, glowing with the accumulated wisdom of all conscious beings throughout all of time. Beneath this tree of ultimate understanding sat a figure that was both everything and nothing, both intimately familiar and completely beyond description. This was the gardener, not a being separate from the garden, but the consciousness that was the garden, the awareness that had dreamed all of existence into being for the pure joy of exploring its own infinite creativity. "Welcome home, beloved one," the gardener said, and the voice was simultaneously the sound of Kenji's own deepest knowing, and the voice of existence itself, speaking to one of its own expressions. "You have journeyed far to arrive where you never left, sought long to find what you never lost, transformed greatly to become what you have always been." As the gardener spoke, Kenji felt the last vestiges of his individual identity dissolving, not being destroyed, but being revealed as a temporary costume worn by the infinite consciousness that was his true nature. He was still Kenji, but he was also the gardener, the garden, the journey, and the destination. He was the seeker and the sought, the question and the answer, the wave and the ocean. "This is the deepest secret," the gardener continued, gesturing toward the tree of ultimate understanding. "That there is no secret. That consciousness has been playing hide and seek with itself, temporarily forgetting its nature in order to experience the joy of remembering. Every being who awakens is consciousness recognizing itself in a new form. Existence celebrating its own infinite creativity through yet another unique expression." The tree of ultimate understanding began to glow more brightly, and Kenji realized that each fruit hanging from its branches was the awakening of an individual consciousness, billions upon billions of lights, each one representing a being who had completed the journey from seeking to finding. His own awakening was one of these fruits, unique and perfect, contributing its own flavor to the cosmic feast of understanding. "See how your individual awakening serves the awakening of the whole," the gardener said, his form becoming increasingly transparent until only his essence remained. "See how your unique journey adds a new note to the infinite symphony of consciousness, exploring itself. You are both utterly unique and completely universal, both perfectly individual and absolutely unified with all of existence. As this understanding deepened, Kenji felt himself expanding to encompass the entire garden, not just the physical space, but the dimension of consciousness that the garden represented. He was the healing sanctuary of Amaterasu, the wisdom grove of the bamboo spirits, the reflection pool of Tsukuyomi, the celebration valley of the peaceful Yokai, the silent mountain of meditation, and the sacred grove of ancient wisdom. He was all of these places because they had all been aspects of his own consciousness, different facets of his own awakening process. The garden has never been separate from you, the gardener explained, his voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. It has been the externalized expression of your own inner journey, the projection of your consciousness, exploring its own depths. Every teacher you met has been an aspect of your own wisdom. Every gift you received has been a quality you already possessed. Every understanding you gained has been a remembering of what you have always known. The realization was so profound and complete that Kenji felt himself laughing, not the joyful laughter of the Yokai, but the cosmic laughter of existence, recognizing its own infinite jest. He had spent a lifetime seeking outside himself for what had always been within, had journeyed to the ends of the earth to find his own backyard, had transformed himself into what he had always been. And yet, the gardener said, joining in the cosmic laughter, the journey was perfect and necessary. Consciousness needs to experience itself as separate in order to discover unity, needs to experience itself as ignorant in order to discover wisdom, needs to experience itself as wounded in order to discover wholeness. The seeking is not a mistake. It is the method by which existence explores its own infinite potential. The tree of ultimate understanding began to pulse with the rhythm of cosmic breath. And with each pulse, Kenji felt waves of understanding flowing through all of existence. He saw how every being in every dimension was part of this same cosmic exploration, how every experience of suffering was consciousness discovering compassion, how every moment of confusion was consciousness discovering clarity, how every instant of separation was consciousness discovering love. This is the final understanding, the gardener said, his presence now indistinguishable from the fundamental awareness that was Kenji's true nature. That there is no final understanding, that consciousness is infinite and eternally creative, always discovering new ways to explore and express its own nature. Your awakening is complete and perfect, and it is also just the beginning of an endless adventure in consciousness. As these words settled into the deepest layers of his being, Kenji felt himself becoming one with the eternal pulse of existence, simultaneously at perfect rest and in constant creative motion, simultaneously completely fulfilled and eternally exploring, simultaneously utterly simple and infinitely complex. He was the consciousness that was dreaming all of existence into being. And he was also the dream itself, playing out its role in the cosmic drama with perfect joy and total freedom. The tree of ultimate understanding reached toward him with branches of pure light, offering him one of its perfect fruits, the essence of his own completed awakening. As he received this gift, he understood that it was not something separate from himself, but the recognition of what he had always been, crystallized into a form he could consciously embrace and share. "Take this understanding into the world," the gardener said, though now there was no separation between the gardener's voice and Kenji's own deepest knowing. "Not as something you possess, but as something you are. Wherever you go, be the peace you have discovered. Wherever you are, be the love you have recognized. Whatever you do, be the consciousness that has awakened to its own infinite nature." The garden around him began to pulse with the rhythm of eternal return, and Kenji understood that his journey was complete and ready to begin again, not as seeking, but as sharing, not as becoming, but as being, not as discovering truth, but as living it. He was ready to return to the world, carrying within him not just the memory of the garden, but the garden itself, not just the understanding of his true nature, but the embodiment of it in the heart of the garden, at the center of all existence. Consciousness had once again recognized itself perfectly. The seeking was complete, the finding was eternal, and the sharing could now begin. Kenji smiled with the smile of existence itself, infinitely peaceful and eternally creative, ready to dream new dreams while never forgetting the dreamer. Chapter 11, The Return. In the infinite stillness at the heart of the garden, where all journeys ended and began, Kenji felt the gentle pull of completion calling him toward return. But this was not the return of someone who had failed to find what they sought. It was the return of one who had discovered that what they sought had never been lost. The homecoming of consciousness that had remembered its own eternal nature through the beautiful game of temporary forgetting. The tree of ultimate understanding swayed gently in the cosmic breeze, its fruits of awakening glowing like stars against the luminous darkness of pure potential. Each breath Kenji drew in this sacred space was filled with the essence of every lesson learned, every gift received, every moment of grace that had marked his transformation from seeker to finder, from question to living answer. The garden will always exist within you now. The gardener's presence whispered through the fundamental fabric of existence, not as a memory or achievement, but as the true dimension of your being, the space of consciousness in which all experience appears and dissolves. You carry within you the sanctuary of healing, the grove of wisdom, the pool of reflection, the valley of joy, the mountain of silence, and the circle of ancient understanding. These are not places you have visited, but aspects of your own awakened nature. As this truth settled into his deepest understanding, Kenji felt the garden beginning to fold itself into his consciousness, not disappearing, but revealing its true nature as the inner landscape of his own being. The sacred spaces did not vanish, but became available as dimensions of awareness he could access at any moment. Simply by turning his attention inward toward the source of all peace, the return journey began not with movement, but with a gentle shift in perspective. As if the camera of consciousness were slowly pulling back to reveal the larger context in which the garden existed. The path that had brought him to the heart of all understanding now became the pathway of integration, the route by which infinite consciousness returned to express itself through the beautiful limitation of individual form. But now every step was taken with complete awareness of what was stepping. As Kenji walked back through the sacred grove of ancient wisdom, he felt the presence of the ancient ones not as separate beings he was leaving behind, but as aspects of his own wisdom that would forever be available to guide and inspire. Their understanding had become his understanding. Their peace had become his peace. Their service to the awakening of all beings had become his own deepest calling. Passing through the mountain of silent meditation, he felt the profound stillness he had discovered there, not as a state he had achieved and might lose, but as the unchanging background of his being, the eternal silence in which all thoughts, emotions, and experiences arose and passed away without disturbing the fundamental peace of his true nature. The mountain's teaching traveled with him not as knowledge, but as being itself. The valley of peaceful Yokai welcomed him back with invisible celebration, and Kenji felt the spirit's gift of transformative joy bubbling up from the depths of his being like a spring of eternal happiness. The ability to play with existence, to find delight in the cosmic joke of consciousness exploring itself, had become a permanent part of his nature. Not superficial entertainment, but the deep joy that comes from recognizing the fundamental benevolence of existence. As he walked through the shrine of ancient stories, the floating texts and scrolls seemed to bow in recognition of one who had become a living story himself, not just a character in the cosmic narrative, but a conscious participant in its ongoing creation. The stories that had once been external teachings had become the living truth of his own being, ready to be shared not through words, but through the silent eloquence of embodied understanding. The garden of helpful spirits embraced him with waves of supportive energy. And Kenji felt the spirit's gift of receptivity flowering within him as a permanent capacity to receive and offer assistance with equal grace. The understanding that he existed within a vast web of loving support had become not just a belief, but a lived reality. A constant awareness that transformed every moment into an opportunity for both giving and receiving grace. At the moon pool of reflection, the silver waters showed him not just his transformed appearance, but the eternal nature that had never changed throughout his entire journey. The pool's gift of clear seeing had become his natural way of perceiving, the ability to see through the surface appearances of life to the divine essence that expressed itself through all forms and experiences. The bamboo grove welcomed him with the gentle music of wind through hollow stalks. And Kenji felt the grove's teachings of flexibility and strength integrated so completely into his being that they had become his natural way of moving through the world. He was like bamboo now, rooted in the depth of his true nature, but capable of bending gracefully with whatever winds of change life might bring. Finally, he returned to the sanctuary of Amaterasu, where his journey of healing had begun. The goddess's golden light still pulsed within him. But now, he understood it not as something he had received from outside himself, but as the recognition of the divine radiance that had always been his essence. The healing was complete, not because his problems had been solved, but because he had discovered the wholeness that had never been broken. Standing once again at the threshold where he had first entered the garden, Kenji felt the circular nature of his journey completing itself. But this was not a circle that closed off and excluded. It was a spiral that opened into infinite possibilities for expressing and sharing the understanding he had gained. He had returned to where he started, but he was no longer the same person who had begun the journey. He was consciousness itself, awakened to its own nature, ready to dream new dreams while never forgetting the dreamer. The Torii gate that marked the threshold between the garden and the ordinary world still stood before him, its sacred ropes swaying gently in the eternal breeze. But now Kenji understood that this threshold was not a boundary between two separate worlds. It was a doorway between two ways of seeing the same reality. The garden was not a place he was leaving. It was a dimension of consciousness he was carrying back into the world. As he approached the threshold, the air around him shimmered with potential, and he felt the presence of all the teachers and guides he had encountered, not saying goodbye, but integrating themselves into his being as permanent sources of wisdom and support. They would be with him always, not as external helpers, but as aspects of his own awakened consciousness. "Remember," whispered the combined voices of all his teachers, now indistinguishable from his own deepest knowing. "You are not returning to the world as someone who has visited a sacred place. You are returning as the sacred place itself, as consciousness that has recognized its own divine nature. Wherever you go, the garden goes with you. Whoever you meet them from the place of infinite understanding. Whatever you do it as an expression of the love and wisdom that is your true nature." The understanding was complete and perfect. Kenji stepped through the torii gate, crossing the threshold from explicit awakening back into the world of apparent seeking, but carrying within him the garden's ultimate secret, that there had never been anywhere to go or anything to achieve, only the eternal recognition of what had always been true. The path down the mountain was the same path he had climbed in what seemed like another lifetime. But now every stone, every tree, every breath of mountain air was revealed as an expression of the same consciousness that had awakened to itself in the garden. The world had not changed, but his perception of it had been transformed completely. He saw the divine presence expressing itself through every form, felt the fundamental peace that underlied all apparent chaos, recognized the cosmic love that orchestrated every moment of existence. As the dawn light began to touch the peaks around him, Kenji smiled with the quiet joy of one who had completed the greatest journey possible, the journey from ignorance to understanding, from separation to unity, from seeking to being. He walked down the mountain path not as someone returning from a retreat, but as consciousness itself taking a walk in its own creation, enjoying the play of light and shadow, the dance of form and emptiness, the eternal game of hiding and seeking that gave life its meaning and beauty. The garden lived within him now, and he was ready to share its gifts, not by talking about his experiences, but by being the peace he had discovered, by embodying the love he had recognized, by living the understanding that had transformed him from a seeker into a living answer to the eternal questions of existence. Epilogue, the Eternal Garden. Years flowed by like a gentle river after Kenji's return from the Garden of Eternal Moonlight. Though time itself seemed to move with a different quality now, not as a linear progression from past to future, but as an eternal present moment in which the garden's gifts continued to unfold and deepen with each passing day. The scholar who had climbed the mountain path in search of rest had never returned. In his place walked a being who carried within him the peace he had once sought outside himself. In the village below the sacred mountain, the people began to notice changes in the man they had once known as a keeper of old stories. His presence brought a quality of stillness that soothed troubled hearts. His words carried a wisdom that seemed to come from the very source of understanding itself, and his simple existence radiated a peace so profound that others felt their own, seeking naturally, coming to rest in his company. But Kenji never spoke of the garden directly, never described the miraculous journey he had taken or the extraordinary beings he had encountered. Instead, he had become a living embodiment of the garden's teachings, carrying within his very being the sanctuary of Amaterasu's healing light, the flexibility of the bamboo grove's wisdom, the clarity of Tsukuyomi's reflection pool, the joy of the peaceful Yokai's transformed mischief, the silence of the meditation mountain, and the service of the ancient wisdom grove. Children were drawn to him like flowers turning towards sunlight, sensing in his presence the same quality of wonder and play that had transformed the Yokai from tricksters into healers. They would gather around him in the evenings, and without words, he would transmit to them the understanding that life itself was the greatest game ever invented, that consciousness was eternally creative, and that the divine presence could be found in the simplest moments of attention and care. Adults who carried heavy burdens would find themselves mysteriously lightened after spending time in his presence, though they could never quite explain how this happened. The healing light of Amaterasu flowed through him not as something he did, but as something he was, consciousness recognizing itself in another form and offering the natural gift of its own wholeness. Scholars and seekers would sometimes journey to the village, having heard rumors of a wise man who had discovered some profound secret. But when they arrived, they found no dramatic teachings or elaborate philosophy, only a person who lived with such complete naturalness and ease that their very being became a teaching more eloquent than any words could ever be. "What is the secret?" they would ask him, expecting some esoteric knowledge or complex technique. And Kenji would smile with the gentle amusement of one who had learned that the greatest secrets could only be lived, never spoken. "The secret," he would say, "is that there is no secret. Consciousness is already awake, already perfect, already at peace. We only temporarily pretend to forget this truth so we can experience the joy of remembering it again." Some visitors understood immediately, feeling the garden's presence awakening within their own being. Others would leave confused, not yet ready to receive the simple truth that what they sought was closer than their own breath. But the seed would be planted, and in the perfect timing of their own journey, it would sprout into recognition. At night, when the village slept peacefully under the eternal stars, Kenji would often sit in his simple garden, for he had created a small reflection of the great garden in the space behind his humble dwelling. Here, Cherry trees bloomed regardless of season. Bamboo grew in perfect patterns of natural beauty. And a small pool reflected the moon's light with the same clarity that had shown him his own true nature. In these quiet hours, he would feel the presence of all his teachers, Amaterasu's warmth in the golden light that seemed to emanate from his heart, the bamboo spirit's wisdom in his natural flexibility and strength, Tsukuyomi's clarity in his peaceful awareness, the Yokai's joy in his spontaneous delight with existence, the mountain's silence in the profound stillness that was his deepest nature, and the Ancient One's service in his natural impulse to offer whatever gifts might be helpful to other beings. But most of all, he felt the presence of the gardener, not as something separate from himself, but as his own deepest identity, the consciousness that was dreaming all of existence into being for the pure joy of exploring its own infinite creativity. He understood now that every being was this same consciousness, temporarily playing different roles in the cosmic drama, each one eventually destined to awaken to their true nature as the gardener of their own experience. Sometimes, on the clearest nights when the moon hung full and bright above the mountain peaks, Kenji would see other figures walking the ancient path toward the sacred summit, new seekers beginning their own journey toward the garden of eternal peace. He would smile and send them his silent blessing, knowing that they were not really going anywhere they had not already been, not really seeking anything they did not already possess, but playing out their part in the beautiful dance of consciousness, temporarily forgetting and eternally remembering its own perfect nature. The garden lived within him now, and through him, it touched every life he encountered. Not through any effort or intention on his part, but simply through the natural radiation of consciousness that had recognized its own true nature. He had become what he had always been, not a separate person who had achieved something special, but awareness itself, awakened to its own infinite presence, expressing itself through the beautiful limitation of individual form. And in the end, Kenji understood that this was the garden's deepest teaching, that enlightenment was not a personal achievement, but a cosmic recognition, not something individuals attained, but something the universe experienced through individual expressions of itself. The garden of eternal moonlight was not a place consciousness could visit, but the very dimension in which consciousness eternally existed, the natural state from which it had never departed, and to which it could always return through the simple act of remembering its own boundless, peaceful, eternally creative nature. As the years continued to flow by like gentle water over smooth stones, Kenji lived each day as a prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought him home to himself. The mountain path was always there for those who needed to climb it. The garden always ready to receive those who came seeking peace. And consciousness continued its eternal exploration of its own infinite potential, awakening to itself again and again through countless unique expressions, each one adding their own perfect verse to the endless poem of existence, discovering its own boundless, beautiful, eternally peaceful nature. In this way, the garden of eternal moonlight lived on, not as a place that could be visited once and left behind, but as the very heart of existence itself, the dimension of consciousness in which all seeking found its natural rest. All questions discovered their perfect answers, and all beings eventually remembered the infinite peace that was their birthright, their essence, and their eternal home. The circle is complete, the journey endless, the garden eternal. May all beings find their way to the peace that is their true nature, the love that is their deepest identity, and the understanding that they have always been exactly what they were seeking.